Deputy Director Judy Jacobson. She's currently serving as the interim executive director. Ms. Carol Scholl, who is our longtime administrative assistant, has since retired. And we've welcomed Angela Brown Walton to join us in that capacity. And she'll be here today taking minutes for this meeting. The commission has also been able to hire part-time but permanent technician level or ecological field specialist positions, which has really helped us to create some continuity. A lot of times in the past, our field assistance was working on an intern-based program with 3 to 6 month tenure, which create a lot of challenges in training and turnover. So in that capacity, with the gap last year in the PLC meeting, we had one ecological field specialist, Broderick DeAngelis, who served with us for 1 year and 3 months, but just recently he accepted a position in Oregon with the Forest Service as a botany technician. So I just want to acknowledge his efforts with us in our first round of hiring as our permanent ecological field specialist. And at the same time, we hired Ms. Jade Blennow, who's still with us currently, and she's in the background here, and she will be presenting later on in the meeting. And just yesterday, we welcomed Sabrina Cohen, who filled the vacancy left by Broderick DeAngelis on his departure. So we're really excited to bring her on board for the field season and looking forward to having her on board. She served with us as an intern last year with some projects, which I will review in my spot coming up later in the meeting. And as my last order of business on the introductions here, I wanted to make a motion. We did send around the minutes for the 2019 meeting. So pending any inputs or changes, I wanted to make a motion to adopt those minutes as final. And if I could get a second on that.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Tom. All right, we'll adopt those minutes as formal, and they are available for your review as well through the email, and we'll make those final. And then I want to turn it over to Mr. Casey.
Okay, thank you, and good morning, everyone. I wish we could be meeting in person again, maybe next time. To make this seem more like a regular meeting, I did go out and get a bagel this morning. So next up on the agenda, we have Forest Health update. Nate and Kelsey, are you there? Take it away.
Or we wanted to give the John or Mr. Pavasic or Mr. Green the opportunity to talk about the fern to forest transition. That was squeaked in the introductions. I'm sorry, Tom.
Yeah, I missed that.
Tim Green, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, everyone. Let me turn on my camera so I know you want to see my lovely face. So, yeah. So a few years ago, we've we started talking about what the long-term existence of fern should be, and we started working with the commission and John to do a transition. We actually presented what fern had done in the past to the commission. The commission voted to that they would like to go forward, and so we started that process around November, December of last year, and we started meeting. Really got into it right after John retired from the commission, and we started working to change the name. We have a new board. We have 3 of the former members of Fern are on the board. The board met and voted to change the name to FOREST. FOREST is an acronym for the Foundation for Research and Stewardship. That gets you the forest in there. And then that's Foundation for Research and Stewardship within the Long Island Pine Barrens Maritime Reserve. So it really is linked to the Maritime Reserve Act and the Pine Barrens Protection Act. We have been meeting on a monthly basis. We got our new bylaws were registered with the state. Fern is registered with the state now. We are still working on the transition of the name. We've got to get the name changed with the IRS. But we're moving forward, and next round of business for Forest is actually to start sitting down with the commission staff and looking at what some of our goals and objectives need to be. And John doesn't even know this. I met with somebody yesterday that once we get the name officially changed with IRS, he's likely to give us a small infusion of funds. So we may actually have our first round of funding. So John, you want to add anything?
Sure. So I think, as Tim indicated, the next step is we will you'll be trying to focus in on the types of activities and projects that the foundation can support. We've been talking about different ways of bringing in funding, and we're just going through some of the additional administrative nuts and bolts, but we're at the point now where we think we can start to focus on those matters. And as Tim indicated, the predecessor organization was FERN, Foundation for Ecological Research in the Northeast. And so we just wanted to bring back that this entity that with the new name is more to be more closely aligned with the Central Pine Barrens and to assist the commission, but not just limited to the Central Pine Barrens. The name Maritime Reserve is in the title. So it goes beyond just the commission's jurisdiction and includes all of the East End, which is part of the Long Island Pine Barrens Maritime Reserve. So the Peconics, it overlaps with Nature Conservancy's Last Great Places, which included the Peconic Bay estuarine system, and also allows continuing the work of FERN to look at similar and support other activities, particularly joint activities with similar habitats in the Northeast. So that it would still allow us to support collaboration. So research activities, for example, collaborating with, say, Cape Cod, the Albany Pine Bush Preserve, and also the New Jersey Pinelands as well. So we're excited to get this moving along, and looking forward to being able to advance some projects, hopefully later this year. And that's all I have.
And finally, the board voted and elected John Pavasek as the executive director. He is unpaid at this point, but he needed something extra to do in his retirement. So if you have anything that you want to talk to about FERN, just contact John.
Okay, thank you, Tim and John. Okay, next up, Nate Hudson, Kelsey McLaughlin, Forest Health update.
Hello, everybody.
Yep.
Awesome. All right, so we're going to do a quick forest health update. I'm going to focus on, as most of you know, the southern pine beetle, and then I'm going to hand it off to Kelsey, and she's going to do oak wilt and beech leaf disease. Just a quick update of what we were able to actually get done in 2020 last year, and what we are expecting to get done, be able to do this year. So we did get 2 flights in last year. We got one in the summer and then one after the growing season. This is the one that I think is the best representation of what was occurring last year. This is the August 2020 flight that I went on with Chris. This is the first year where we actually tried to parse out the black turpentine beetle and southern pine beetle from the air. So if you see, we added pink, which is black turpentine beetle damage. It was quite light throughout the core of the pine barrens. I don't know if you can see my mouse. I'll try to use it as a pointer. It was quite light throughout the core of the pine barrens, with, the kind of known warmer area here in East Quogue, and a little activity in South Haven. But out here on the South Fork, early in the spring, we kind of rediscovered this infestation here in North Sea, on a property that's kind of a group of different properties known as Great Hill. This is a zoom in of it. So I went through and I made just a quick little, like, where is the available pine file, and then overlaid it with the ground survey data. Actually, here, this is the South Fork, and then this is that property known as Great Hill. So we went out in the early spring, we surveyed it, and we surveyed it several times last year to see its growth, and you can see that it really expanded very, very quickly. And that whole property, I think, has been pretty well consumed. A lot of the pine is gone. This is sort of a patchwork of different land ownerships, public and private. But it is mainly public access with a trail going through it and a ad hoc trail system. But that infestation's well within the homeowners here and getting up into these homeowners here. And that's our concern for this summer in Southampton. And then out in East Hampton, where we've had historic suppression, especially in Northwest Harbor County Park and Barcelona Neck, and then some other public lands, off of, I think this is Six Pole Highway. There's a property here we've done a lot of work on. This infestation is much more dispersed, and our goal is to keep suppressing the public land where we have, the land we have access to, and try to keep this infestation dispersed. In East Hampton this year, unfortunately, this area in Great Hill it's pretty much outside of what we can handle, what can be done at this point, which most likely means that it's going to grow a little bit to this sort of extent here within the housing, the urban forest interface. And I think it'll stop there maybe this year or next, having consumed most of the pine in this little pocket. And that's just really, it makes me sad. My tone shifted in my voice even. So this is where we were able to get out and do suppression. We were able to get fall suppression done before the holidays last year in October through December. Again, we got a couple areas out on the South Fork we were able to work. We did not work this area in North Sea. All the green areas were active infestations that we were able to come and cut and suppress and deemed them complete. There are some red areas that were on properties we weren't able to access. So that's why they weren't suppressed within the core, but they're very small. Our average infestation within the core of the Pine Barrens was 2.5 trees. So most of these green dots represent, between 2 and 5 trees, or 1 tree even, which is just fantastic. So here's our total suppression numbers since basically the beginning in 2015. 2020, we cut about 550 trees, which is very similar to 2019. And my hopes and our goal as a program is that within the core of the Pine Barrens, that this is the sustained management that will need to get done annually, right around 500 trees. Depending on whether it's a more active year, it might increase, or a less active year, but this is really where we want to keep it, within the Pine Barrens. And then giving every available resource we can to what's going on the South Fork, especially in East Hampton, because there's a little bit more access and a little bit more properties that were able to have suppression with continuous pine forests out there. So we did trap last year, and we did have some positives in the lower Hudson Valley. I know you're all on Long Island, but this beetle's northward expansion should be a concern to everyone. We've continuously gotten at Bear Mountain, Shinnemonk, and Minnewaska, or Rosa Gap, which is on the same mountain. We've continuously gotten positives here, and we've seen increase. These catch around in the order of 150 beetles last year, both of these sets of traps combined. So we're going to be doing aerial surveys, and if we see anything, we'll get down and ground survey these areas this summer. All right, so other than suppression, we've been doing a lot of SBB prevention and forest restoration work. Many of you might be aware of some of our projects. John Mornett's, done a lot of these, but I'll just list them off. So in Rocky Point, we have the demonstration forest. We have done a thinning south of Kearns Field, and another one on Wading River Hollow Road. And in Rocky Point, we put in 13 miles of fire breaks. In Sarnoff, we have planned, it's kind of this area that we're thinking about naming Salamander Forest, but that name is up in the air. That's over on the west, or on the east side of Sarnoff. And then we've done our 75 acres of 145 acre thinning over on the west side of Sarnoff State Forest. And as many of you might be aware, we got fire in the woods on Long Island. I asked Chris how many blocks of the demonstration forest. Each block is 3 acres that we've burnt, and he said that we burnt 4 blocks this spring. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make any of them, but I did get burning in up in Albany, so I did get some fight to be a little firebug up here, and I hope to get down in the fall, and I will be coming down in a few weeks for the spring Fire Academy. If anybody wants to see me. So the demonstration forest, there's 2 demonstration forests, demonstration 1 and demonstration 2. They're different, they're different blocks that are laid out, that are untreated, that are not thinned at all, that are thinned, and then blocks that are thinned and burned. So in the blocks where fire is part of the management, so that we can compare the different types of management and the results that we get. This is a picture Chris sent me of one of the fires, I think in demonstration forest 2 over by Whiskey Road and Whiskey Field. So this is really exciting for anybody so many people have put so much time into getting this fire on the ground, and I just want to thank everybody. And with that, I think the next slide, I pass it over to Kelsey.
Yeah, thanks, Nate. So I'm just going to talk about a few programs, starting with our Early Detection Rapid Response Survey. This is a survey that's aimed to capture non-native bark and ambrosia beetles in high-risk areas. So any kind of distribution center, railway areas, anything where there's a lot of stuff coming and going. It first started in a pilot phase in 2001 to 2005 and found 5 new established species in North America. And then it was nationally implemented in 2007. So we continue to do this survey, and other states are also involved. We trap from March to June. That's when these bark beetles are kind of coming out and are the most active. Next slide, Nate. So these are the trapping locations. They're focused around the St. Lawrence Seaway this year, but down on Long Island, there is Otis Pike Preserve and then Greenwood Cemetery nearby in Brooklyn. And this does work for Long Island. We continue to get new species from Long Island traps. So last year there were 3 new state records from Long Island traps. Nestis mutilatus, which is a small bark beetle that attacks stressed and weakened trees, that was introduced to Mississippi in 1999. And then also Pitiophthorus confusus and Pseudopitiophthorus pubescens. Next slide, Nate. I also work with oak wilt, which is a disease that affects oak trees. It was found in 4 locations in Long Island in 2016. So West Islip, Riverhead, and Southold. We've continued to survey the area since then. We do aerial surveys in July and September. We continue to respond to public calls, but we have not found any infected trees since 2016 on Long Island. We do continue to find new infected trees in the Glenville area and the Canandaigua Lake area. Next slide. So we are kind of researching, looking for the disease in other ways. This is really exciting stuff. So we're looking at using the nididulid beetles, which is the picture in the lower right. These are the beetles that actually vector the fungus. So they feed on the fungus spore mats, get covered in spores, and then can take those spores to new trees that are wounded by pruning or weather events, and then can kind of deposit the spores in those new trees and infect them. So what we're able to do is trap these beetles and actually test them using PCR with Cornell and determine if they have those oak wilt spores on them. So we did this across the state in 2019 and actually got a Nidaduwig positive at Wildwood State Park. So that was our Long Island Nidaduwig positive, and then also one nearby in Brooklyn. In 2020, we looked at using this as kind of an early detection survey. So we used this survey in new areas near the PA border where we thought the disease might be coming into the state. And all 5 of our early detection sites had Nidaduwig positives. So this is a really exciting way to kind of see where this disease is moving and active on the landscape. We also work with New York, New Jersey Trail Conference's conservation dogs. So that's Dia up in the top right. Dia has been trained to detect the oak wilt fungus through smell. And we're really looking forward to using them in survey and other kind of areas to maybe as another way to try and detect this fungus in new areas of the state. Next slide, please. So I can't do an oak wilt presentation without talking about best management practices briefly. As we get into July and August, please just report any symptomatic trees that drop their leaves. We are still looking to see if this disease is continuing to be a problem on Long Island. We know it's still around because of the Nidaduwig surveys. So we're looking for those symptomatic trees. Please avoid pruning or wounding oaks from March to September. That's right now. The Nidaduwigs are flying, they are active. So if wounding does occur, just give it a quick coat of paint to seal off that wound. And then also please avoid moving firewood to reduce the risk of transporting spore mats. Spore mats form mainly from April through July. So it is really easy to move these on a piece of wood and not even know and transport the disease to new areas. The Suffolk County Oak Wilt Quarantine District is also still in effect. So right now you cannot move firewood out of Suffolk County from April to July. Next slide. So the other disease that I work with is beech leaf disease. This is a new forest disease that was found in 2012 in Ohio, and since then has continued to spread to multiple other states. In Long Island, we found it in 2019. So you can see the most recent state map on the left and then the kind of multi-state map on the right. We found this disease travels very, very quickly and is popping up in a lot of new places. Next slide.
Yes.
This is our survey map from last year. On Long Island, we mainly get reports from arborists through Suffolk County Cornell Cooperative Extension.
Okay,
But anybody can report this disease using IMAP invasives. So what you're looking for if you want to report are those dark bands on the underside of the leaves when you hold it up to the light. Really severely infested leaves will have that kind of crinkled, leathery appearance. And we're looking for really any information we can get. But this year we do have an early report in Nassau County, which would be a new county for us. So that still has to be confirmed, but any information as we kind of continue to fill in across Long Island and then also into New York City, all those reports are valuable. And I think that's all I have. If anybody has questions.
I think we did have one hand raised earlier. No? Okay. All right. Next up then, Bob Panko with the Prescribed Fire Program. Thank you, Kelsey and Nate, by the way. Okay.
There we go. I'm unmuting me. There. Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can't see me. I don't know why, but oh well. Well, we'll worry about that later. You can see my screen. So let's and you can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Good. We're going to talk about 4 topics here. We're going to talk about the comprehensive fire management plan that we have finally completed and published. We're going to talk about prescribed burn plans and how we've been doing those for the Central Pine Barrens Commission in conjunction with the New York State DEC. We're going to talk very briefly about the burning operations that we conducted this spring. And we're going to talk very briefly about prescribed fire outreach education stuff. So with that, start with the comprehensive Central Pine Barrens fire management plan. This thing came out finally this year in January. We published it. It's a tome. It's a couple of almost 200 pages, but there's a lot of it's packed full of information in there. And some of those information highlights are the fire history stuff. We took the data that TNC had expanded upon over the years, starting in 1994, and really kind of brought that to life with some visual depictions of that. Biggest thing in the fire history we found is that every decade since 1930s, there were major fires over 100 acres in forest in Long Island, and many of them over totaling hundreds or thousands of acres. Every decade, multiple fires like that. But since 1995, we've only had one fire of that sort, the Crescent Bow fire. Only one fire that has exceeded 100 acres in timber. That's representing a pretty concerning fire return interval disturbance in the Pine Barrens of Long Island, which kind of brings forward the reason why we need to have a little more prescribed burning to restore that. You can take a look at the plan. The link's at the bottom of the page. You'll have a copy of this as part of the recording, so you can get the final comprehensive plan there to look it over and have any questions on it. Some of the things that were done in the comprehensive plan, I mentioned this a while back, a year ago when we, or 2 years ago when we met, but we broke down the 106,000 acres of the Central Pine Barrens into 5 fire management units. They kind of align with the stewardship units that were developed by the Protected Lands Council, but kind of clumped some of those together. They were also based on fire history and land ownership and distinctive discernible boundaries. So a boundary that you could drive on, not one that you have to walk through on a trail. Looking at these fire management units, it's a good way to break down fire management and prescribed fire management in the Central Pine Barrens. But it's also a good link here, as you are all talking about your projects. You can really look and see, what's going to be going on with prescribed fire in those different fire management unit areas, and how you can link in your projects to what's going on with prescribed fire. And a big thing that it also did is it encouraged the establishment of what I call prescribed fire enhancement zones that are identified in the plan. And what basically that is taking advantage of opportunities to create progressive burning upon black, areas that we've already burned, and then to expand those areas outward and to burn in more areas adjacent to them. I'll talk about that in a moment. As part of that comprehensive fire management plan development, I did look at prescribed fire sites that were proposed in 2005. And I never really saw a great deal of documentation on this project. Probably you in the audience here know far more about it than I do. But you had proposed several sites, and in October of 2005, we're supposed to talk about which of those sites you would recommend for possible burning in the future, starting in 2006. So I use those kind of as a nucleus too, and I looked at things in helping to develop the 18 projects that we have for prescribed fire planned over the next decade in the Central Pine Barrens. And those 18 projects are depicted here on this slide. And what you see in red are also the areas that had been discussed by the Protected Lands Council on being targets for prescribed burning in 2006, starting in 2006. And you can see that the projects that I developed in this comprehensive plan encompassed most of those recommendations and expanded upon those recommendations of the Protected Land Council. Things I'll point out here when we talk about this, it's as Dave Crary would say up in the Cape Cod, we're going to eat this elephant a little bite at a time. We're talking here of these 18 projects. We've only talked about 8,000 acres that we're looking at in the total of 106,000 in the forest. So we're talking about 8% of the land over the next decade. Even at that, though, we're hoping that we can maybe burn 300 acres a year of timbered areas. That's going to give 3,000 total forest acres treated in 10 years. It's only about 3% of the total central pine barrens. But we're targeting and putting these in burns in areas that where there's existing burn plans in place, where areas where Nate and John Wernett's crews there have been working and mechanically treating. We're really focused on urban interface protection. And the idea is if we can build some urban interface protections, then perhaps the wildfires can play more of a role without having to worry about protecting homes and working with forest health improvement stuff. I'm going to go through the fire management units and talk about the separate projects we have in there. Nate already talked about south of Kearns, that the thinning that they did there. We developed a plan. The state DEC thinned out 60 acres south of Kearns Field. I wrote a prescribed burn plan that's now been approved. We're hoping to implement come in August, starting in August, for a total of 123 acres in there. Again, these are projects that are laid out over the course of the next 10 years. We're hoping to get a few acre patches burned in there. Nate already talked about this is Demo Forest 2 up in here, of which three plots of those were burned. There's Demo Forest 1 over in here, developed by DEC. One of the future projects that we have in mind is this whole eastern WUI protection. We'd like to put in burns that take advantage of the existing fire breaks, as well as the and reduce fire in the backyards of urban interface areas, allowing fire to play out more of a role with wildfires in the interior of the Rocky Point. These green areas are also the state project areas for grassland burning. That's also incorporated in these 18 total projects. So we have a total of 900, almost 1,000 acres in Rocky Point Fire Management Unit over the course of the next decade, planned right now. It's not to say other things couldn't pop in. Brookhaven Fire Management Unit, the only project the Central Pine Barrens Commission worked on is trying to develop with Suffolk County, dependent upon an agreement with them, trying to get into some of the southern pine beetle impacted pines in the South Haven County Park. Other than that, Brookhaven National Lab in pink right in here is still looking at doing, and Kathy will talk about that, fuel reduction near the communities and ecological restoration and forest management burning. Wertheim National Refuge, Wildlife Refuge here. It's kind of had a lull in burning for the past few years, but talking to the prescribed fire specialist there, Tom Liegos, replaced Mike Durfee. They're looking at doing strategic wildland urban interface treatments. They got a lot of houses right along their eastern boundary, especially, and some scattered houses along their western boundary, as well as doing some upland forest and grassland management burns in that area. So most of that, you know what, I put the two federal areas in Brookhaven Fire Management Unit for a reason, because they have really carried most of the fire over the decades in Brookhaven Fire Management Unit. Whoops. Okay. There we go. All right. There we go. Let's talk about Mandeville Calverton Fire Management Unit. Mandeville Calverton, you know, is some of the greatest fire history that's gone on. It's got the, state forest there, Otis Pike State Forest. It's got the Eastport, Pine Meadows area in here, the county lands and Eastport lands of New York State DEC. What we've developed in projects there, the dark green again, are the the grassland fire management units that are already under plans by the New York State DEC. The yellow ones are areas that we have developed plans for. One of those was an area up in here that we developed as a training zone for fire management. It's an area that is surrounded by grasslands that we can burn off, and then the fire zone is the forested area, the 9 acres in the interior, is completely bomb-proof from escaping anywhere. So we can light up wildfires there and let people train in suppressing wildfires. We'll talk about down here in Eastport and Pine Meadow. We want to expand that. That's always been a project there. You can see that was proposed by you guys, PLC, back in 2005. So we want to expand that and make a whole fire management zone that includes both state and county lands in that area. And up here, this is one that we really want to elaborate upon. I call this the Otis Pike Prescribed Fire Enhancement Zone. It's 2,100 acres. This was an area I thought, with the way we've already been burning prescribed fire and grasslands embedded in this zone, that you guys had identified this area on county lands that was oak wilt kind of place, or some oak kind of disease stuff going on back there. Back in 2005, you identified that as an area to burn. And this other green area is all state lands. We looked at saying, okay, let's combine all this stuff. We can burn black against black and expand this zone, making it easier. When I do this, I'm writing up a landscape burn plan that covers 2,000 acres in one shot. I also talked to Kathy over at BNL with the possibility, since their lands extend to the east of the big power line here, this is all federal land, and here this is county land to the east of that. If we add in this 900 acres to this Otis Pike Prescribed Fire Enhancement Zone, we can make it a 3,000 acre prescribed fire zone. I don't think there's anything else like that going on within the state of New York. So that would be an area over the next decade. We could do a lot of prescribed fire areas. I got a lot of fires here, but most of the fires that we had last year, the wildfires of 2020, almost all occurred in this area here, in this enhancement zone. So we got some black we can work with out in there. Over in Southampton Fire Management Unit, two big things. One was one big plan that we're working on right now, plan I'm writing on right now. I'll show you some slides of the Sarnoff West. You guys proposed burning some of this area here in the middle. I said, once we're writing this up, let's go with the whole unit. We're looking also at Sarnoff East. Nate's Salamander Forest is up in here. That's what he was talking about, right? Also over here to the east on Hubbard County Park, I've developed an area around Penny Pond here where we could do a series of prescribed burns to protect this urban community that's right here, protect it from big fires coming in with southwest winds. And we also have an area over here in Hubbard that we can enhance that's been southern pine beetle. This has all been southern pine beetle pretty hit. So we could use some prescribed fire to tune it up. Dwarf pine projects. You guys had talked about a nice little chunk over here, which would be nice to do, but right now it's kind of a mixture of county, state, county land and private lands. I've started working right now on a plan for the dwarf pines that was based on trying to protect this little community subdivision, 60 homes, called Oakville, which is embedded right there in the edge of the dwarf pines. The dwarf pines, by the way, fire history is every decade, that within every 20 years since 1930, there's been major fires, large fires, multiple large fires within the dwarf pines. They have a fire return interval of about 20 years. Well, you know what? 1995 was 25 years ago now, 26 years ago. We're overdue. So I was hoping to do some prescribed burning in the oak forests that are here surrounding this subdivision, and eventually expand some into out into the dwarf pines here and put some fire. This forest of dwarf pines here has not had fire in it in about 60 years. Also try to put in some urban protections down here to the south. Moving ahead on the agenda here, we're talking about the prescribed burn plans that we're writing. We're writing prescribed burn plans using the National Wildfire Coordinating Group format, which is a very comprehensive format used nationwide, been multiple variations of that since 1990s, and is now being directed by the state of New York, DEC has directed that that format for plans will be used for all burn plans in the state of New York. It complies with all the 194 rules that we have. Every plan that I'm working on is a landscape plan versus small units. And there's an emphasis of burn mosaic versus broadcast burning. If I'm laying out a 20-acre burn plot, a burn block of 20 acres, I'm probably planning on burning that in 2 to 5 acre chunks over multiple years for a decade. Talking about that, Sarnoff West burn plan, this is the most aggressive one that we've had so far. This is a 1,200 acre zone. all west of County Road 104, over here just south of Riverhead. And right here, this is the town of Riverside right in here. Prescribed fire enhancement zone, 1 burn unit, 23 burn blocks, 1,200 acres. Fire return interval departure. This is mostly a shrubby pitch pine forest that hasn't had fire disturbance in it in, maybe 100 years. So the goal is to reset the fire return interval on this landscape over a period of a decade. The way we're going to do that is breaking this fire into chunks. This is the areas that Nate and his crew have mechanically reduced, have mechanically treated. We're looking at starting to burn in those areas, burning patches in those areas first, eventually to expand upon this building black out from black and bringing it fire out into areas that have not been mechanically treated over the years, with the end result in a decade saying that we're going to have almost 800 acres of fire on this 1,200 acre area and reset that fire return interval that has been unnaturally disturbed. So that's what we're going at in that. What we did this past year, what New York State DEC did, and it was supported by us and Brookhaven National Lab and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and Albany Pine Bush and other volunteers and other resources, totally burned 199.9 acres of lands on just short of 200 acres. We did some grassland burning in Fresh Pond Central, Fresh Pond South, which was those areas that I talked about up there, allowing us to use that practice area, that training area. We burned Whiskey Field over here. We burned North River Road, which is off the map here, and we burned Currents Field over in here. Demo forest wise, we burned these 3 blocks that you see right in here, and we did some burning in timber in the drill zone as well, just about 0.4 of an acre. We've moved forward on fire education and outreach. We've got various things out there, videos that you can get at this website. We have our own fire website now, commission website, prescribed fire website, via video on that website. We've had numerous press releases there, as well as New York DEC. And that's about it in all the time I've got. So any questions you've got, I don't know if there's any even on the board here maybe. So other than that, I'd say I'm pretty much done.
Okay. Thank you, Bob. Very good. Next up, USGS water quality. That's Irene Fisher.
Yes, hi, thank
Good
you.
morning.
Good morning. Just get set up here. My screen being shared. Oh, hold on, here we go. Okay, that should be up now. You see the screen?
Yep.
Okay, great. No, thank you for this opportunity. I wanted to introduce myself and our projects, anyone who may not be aware of what we've already been doing. And I just wanted to share the available resources that we have. In particular, I'm highlighting some of the monitoring efforts that we've done in either we just finished or they're ongoing. And I thought these may be interesting to review with your group, just for particularly for the invasive species monitoring that are going on. So the 2 projects I'm going to go over is our hydrologic monitoring within the Central Pine Barrens, and as well as I'm going to share some highlights from a pesticide monitoring project that we just completed in the groundwater. Okay, here we go. So this first project is an island-wide pesticide groundwater assessment throughout Long Island. It was done between 2016 and 2018, and we had analyzed shallow groundwater samples from the upper glacial aquifer. So we're looking at no more than about 100 feet below the surface of land surface. And we looked at over 200 different types of pesticides. And a lot of this was coordinated efforts between Suffolk County Department of Health Services, DEC, LICAP, Cornell Cooperative Extension, and also to try to put some additional data into the Long Island pesticide pollution prevention strategy that the DEC is running at this point. So that, like I said, this has been published. I'm just going to share the highlights, and if you are interested, I can share. I have no problem sharing this article with you guys for additional work. So the well locations, we separated them into 3 different types of well networks to describe our data. I don't think I need to go into gory details about what the differences between, or the comparison between Nassau and Queens and the Suffolk County wells. These pesticide management wells, these were all located in Suffolk County. And what's particularly different about these is that they were located either on agricultural or horticultural land or just down gradient of that area. The areas were all registered pesticide use and application, and that's either with the health department, DEC, Cornell Cooperative Extension. And so these samples were collected in coordination with those particular agencies. I do want to mention that the pesticide management area does include golf courses and greenhouses, and that's not typical for other studies outside of our areas. They don't typically include a golf course or maybe a greenhouse in agriculture and horticultural land use. This is an overview, kind of summarizes the entire study. Map of Long Island, each one of those spots are the locations of the wells, and each one it's separated into the 3 major classes of pesticides. So fungicides are on top, then insecticides and herbicides. An open symbol would be an area of non-detect, and the color ramped up. So there's color ramps, and there's also the size of the shape. These are representing the total concentration of that particular pesticide class in nanograms per liter, or parts per trillion. So on the top there with the fungicides, you see primarily the colors are all in these squares, and that's our pesticide management network. The larger the square, the greater the concentration. If you look at the scale down on the guide down here on the right-hand side. Insecticides, we see a similar story. The squares are they're colored in, and they're larger than most of the other symbols across the island. Lastly, coming into herbicides, these seem to be the most widespread throughout the island, and again, heavily in the pesticide management network. Just going to bring some highlights of each of the 3 groups, the fungicides, herbicides, and insecticides. So when it came to the fungicides, we saw a predominance of degradates. These 2 particular degradation products here, triazole and 4-hydroxychlorothianol. Triazole is a degradation product of propiconazole and myclophenol. Propiconazole is typically found with grasses. These are our ornamentals. This is a fungicide that's applied to the ornamentals. So that's grasses, trees, shrubs, and flowers. And the myclophenol, we've been seeing that's a fungicide applied for grapes and tree fruits. So on the graph here, and I apologize, this is all in nanograms per liter. I left off the units on that one. So every graph here is nanograms per liter or parts per trillion. 59%, this is the detection frequency, 59% of the wells within the pesticide management network did have a detection for this degradation product. We found a few of it in the other areas as well. The 4-hydroxychlorothianol, this happened to be the greatest measured concentration that we found for the entire study, and it's a degradation product. It's a non-target active ingredient, just to keep that in mind here. It is a degradation product of chlorothianol, which is typically used in, there are several uses for it, but we've been finding in Long Island, it's primarily applied to areas for like grass management, like sod and turf. So you're looking at golf courses and your sod farms, really. So it was all detected within the pesticide management network. I have a few other studies here just for comparison, like where we've been finding the concentrations a lot. This is something new for the area. We don't have any history of either one of these pesticide degradates in any of the past management, or I should say monitoring efforts in Long Island. The insecticides, imidacloprid, it was found across all 3 different monitoring networks here, and this is consistent with the New York State DEC assessment. It's, we know it's commonly used around Long Island, but at least here, this is one of the more recent monitoring efforts across the island. So we have a starting zone. We have an understanding of like what's already present in the groundwater when it comes to the imidacloprid concentrations. The highest concentrations were found again in greenhouses and at golf courses, and that's within the pesticide management network. And over here, aldicarb, this was our other insecticide that was most frequently detected. was frequently detected. Aldicarb hasn't been applied in 40 years, but we're still seeing some of the detections still in Suffolk County and some of these pesticide management wells. The concentrations are lower than we've seen in previous monitoring efforts. It's just a reminder, it's still there. Herbicides, this was the pesticide class that we found most widely across Long Island. The simazine, and so simazine and atrazine I'm focusing in on here. We found mainly the degradation product of simazine in the pesticide management network, and then just simazine was located in the Nassau, Queens. These concentrations, even with the average the atrazine, they are fewer detections than a previous monitoring effort that occurred across the island, but they're still present. What we could take away from this is, while like simazine and atrazine are one of the more widely used herbicides across the nation, it doesn't seem to be as great of a concentration that we've been seeing across Long Island. It's just not as prevalent as it is in other areas. And this is most likely the reflection of the current management strategies, primarily led by the charge by the DEC and Cornell Cooperative Extension for educating and trying to reduce the overall detections and the concentrations that we're finding in the groundwater. So just to summarize that, I'm going pretty quickly here. I just wanted to go touch on to these main highlights of the project, but in summary, you take a ride down any one of these streets down on the east end, and it's easy to tell that the pesticide management across the North Fork, the Long Island agricultural region, is pretty complex. Within a 2 to 3 mile stretch, you have a sod farm, a vineyard, a greenhouse, even a golf course. So we also found that monitoring for that broad range of pesticides and their degradants, remember we looked at like over 200 different types of pesticides in this study for each one of the samples that we collected. We found it useful, particularly as the land use continues to change, and that there were new pesticides that were becoming available, and these pesticide management strategies change. We found that the fungicide was predominantly reflects that intense use in the Long Island agriculture in this area. It's most likely not a surprise for most of us around here. Pesticide degradants are oftentimes detected at higher concentrations than the active ingredient. And we're also seeing that some of these legacy pesticides, aldicarbs and actinolides, are still detected in Long Island groundwater, even though they've been banned nearly 40 and 20 years ago. And then we also pointed out in this study that the comparisons between the detections in this study to the observations in the DEC's Long Island Pesticide Pollution Prevention Strategy Management Plan, they have decreased in the occurrence and the concentrations of some of these pesticides of concern. So it's a winning program in a sense. The education is coming out. I'm going to just switch now over to the hydrologic monitoring that we're doing within the Central Pine Barrens. We're doing, we're looking at stream discharge, groundwater levels, and we're also doing some stream chemistry within the two major rivers there, the Peconic and the Carmen's River. And the idea here is to develop a baseline chemistry for these streams. And using that baseline chemistry, that's going to help us determine the degree of influence from the anthropogenic sources surrounding the areas. Just a quick overview, these are the locations that we're currently monitoring within the Pine Barrens here. The orange circles and the yellow triangles, those are our groundwater monitoring locations. The blue streams, those the Carmens and the Peconic, we have 5 locations on the Carmens and 2 locations on the Peconic River that we've been collecting stream water quality data. Periodically, discharge is measured at all 7 of those locations. I'm just going to focus a little bit on the hydrographs that are available for the Peconic and the Carmen's River gauge. These are always fun to look at. If you have a large storm event, how does the discharge change? These are all groundwater fed streams. So the flow that's in these rivers is reflective of the amount of groundwater that's available in those areas. These are long-term records. The color ramping on either side, the black line in the center of each one of these is the most recent discharge measurement, and the color ramping on either side here follows this chart down here. This is gives you an idea of statistically where we are. Are we in a drier period or are we in a wetter period? This is also going to give you an idea too of when we expect to see more flow versus a lower flow period. And that's happens to do with the seasonality too. Just to bring it back, so most of our majority of our wells across Long Island are measured on a monthly basis, which is visiting the well, inspecting the well, and taking a tape down measurement. And we use that to try to describe where the water table is sitting, and it gives information about when we're entering a period of drought or we're in a heavier, wetter period. This particular well that I've highlighted here is located near Artist Lake. It's a continuous groundwater measuring. So it's measuring water levels about every 15 minutes. And this well was selected to go on continuous to kind of help give us additional information about just to give us a better understanding of the start of flow for the Carmens River in that area. So if you look at this one all the way onto the right here, the red line, those are our monthly measurements there, right? As well as the continuous data that's been put in there. The color ramping is similar to what we're seeing at the discharge for the, that I just showed you at those gauges. So you can see where statistically where it's a lower period would be a drought, and where it's, the greener, the bluer shades, that's more of a wet period. So that's the range that we've seen over the decades worth of data that we have available for this particular site. And this is helpful since it's in the groundwater table. This is directly linked to these ponds that are responding to changes in groundwater. And we've been finding them helpful to, particularly with discussions about Middle Island, the Artist Lake area, and most importantly to the Carmens River when the start of flow is, because that value, that start of flow changes periodically. And I'm going to just switch now over to the stream sampling that we have going on at these rivers. The Carmens River, we're doing a seasonal sampling, quarterly seasonal sampling. This is just an example of what we've done this past year, and then continue planned. The Peconic River, we're sampling at 2 locations, and that's just at fall and spring. And at each time we go out to sample these wells, at each time that we go out to sample these streams, we're collecting samples for the analysis of nutrients and major inorganics. So that's going to be calcium and your sodium, iron. So we have now we're in our 4th or the 5 years of this monitoring project right now. So we have a pretty good library of the typical ranges of each one of those concentrations over the seasons. I have a star next to our spring sampling this past year. Spring, we collected additional samples for pharmaceutical and pesticide analysis. We do this once a year at both of these streams, and the Peconic River, it's at both locations, and for the Carmens River, it's just at the gauge site there. So right now we're doing it in the spring. The following year, in 2022, we're going to be sampling during the fall. And in previous years, we've alternated between spring and fall. And that's to get a high and a low expected concentration of the pesticides and the pharmaceuticals. That pesticide analysis, by the way, is the exact same pesticide analysis that we did for the groundwater monitoring project that I highlighted in the beginning of this talk. So the results are directly comparable. They're all in concentrations of nanograms per liter. What's neat about these streams too is because they are groundwater fed, you can also kind of look at them as almost like you can refer to them as like a groundwater outcrop, so to speak. So anything that's entering into the groundwater at the land surface, eventually it's going to get down its way into the streams. I do want to mention here that we just started this past year a quarterly sampling project at the Nissequogue River. So these rivers will be able to we'll be able to directly compare the concentrations that we're seeing across it. So for Long Island speak, then we're looking at our more urbanized area. And as we move out to the Peconic, a more rural location. So we'll be able to determine or be able to speak about the changes in the chemistry across the island that we're finding in the rivers. This is just a quick example then too of some of the data that we have. This is total nitrogen, the filtered nitrogen milligrams per liter from last year's samples. On the left-hand side, it's the Carmens River. We're starting at the uppermost part of the stream on the lower left here. It starts at Bartlett, goes down Upper Lake, Lower Lake, our gauge location, and tidal. This is total nitrogen in milligrams per liter. So it's on a log scale here. 1 is listed here, 10 is up here. Bartlett is our site that has the widest range and concentration, but it's really not too big of a wide range. Remember here, this is about 0.4 milligrams per liter, and the greater range is the higher point of the range is about 1 milligram per liter. We anticipate or we expect to see the greatest range in concentrations at Bartlett because it is such a shallow location. The sampling location also happens to be right off the side of Bartlett Road in it's like an underpass, like a storm sewer, I guess you could look at it. A culvert, that's what they call them, a culvert that runs underneath the road. So it is most affected by any of the runoff that comes from the roads. As you move downstream for the Carmen's River, the nitrogen slightly increases, but it remains fairly steady throughout the stream. Peconic River, this one a little bit further east, it's more, it's a more rural area. For when I speak with cooperators or colleagues outside of the Long Island metropolitan area, I redefine what rural is for Long Island, and I've kind of come down to the consideration, tell them anywhere that you can't get a pizza delivered after 10 o'clock at night, that's considered rural for Long Island. So our upstream location here for Peconic, it's hovering right around like 0.4 milligrams per liter. And then as you get downstream to the gauge, which is in the area with there's more businesses and stuff, it's slightly, it elevates a little bit. So we have this baseline, we have an understanding now, at least of what the total nitrogen is. It's a new baseline for the current conditions. Let's see what I have on here next. Okay, so one of the reasons why I wanted to bring this type of monitoring to your attention and just discuss it a little bit more. In particular, so we have this background information about, I'm going to focus here on the pesticide concentrations. We have this baseline. We have the current idea of like what the concentrations we should be expecting within the groundwater, possibly now even in the surface water for the Peconic and the Carmen's River. The DEC is going to be starting, if you're not aware, they're doing a pilot project for the removal of Ludwigia in the Peconic River. And that was supposed to start this past week at the Browns Bog. And they're going to be applying an herbicide, Clearcast and Procella Core. I'm not too familiar with these particular ones. We've been monitoring for these particular active ingredients in our pesticide monitoring. So I can tell you right now, across Long Island, we have not detected at least the Clearcast one. I haven't been able to find any information about the Procella active ingredient there, but the Clearcast Imizamox, I may be slaughtering that one because I am not familiar with that particular herbicide. We have not, I'm going to repeat that, we haven't found that in the groundwater anywhere. We've also been sampling for that within the streams, and we haven't detected it. So here is an instance, like we just collected a pesticide sample in the May. We're analyzing the area. There are samples for this particular pesticide, and then now the DEC is going to be using that herbicide this spring. And then in the fall, we're expected to go back and collect another sample for pesticides. So we'll be able to get the before and after the capture to see if any of this particular herbicide is hanging out in the Carmen's River long after it's expected to degrade. So that kind of information, I think, is really helpful to the DEC and as well as any of the any other invasive monitoring programs to understand, like, what's our baseline? What are we starting with as far as what types of pesticide concentrations that are already present in the area? I think that's about, that's all I had. I promised to try to keep it as short. I know I had a lot of information there, but I encourage you guys to reach out. Sometimes the USGS data can be a little difficult to find. I've had some trouble with it too, but I encourage you, if you think there may be some additional monitoring data that we may have that may be able to support your other efforts that you're doing, please reach out and we'll do our best to help get you all that information. And we'd love to collaborate on a lot of these projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Irene. Any questions? Okay. Next up, vernal pools. John Turner.
Yes, hi, Tom. Good
How
morning,
are you?
everybody. Can you hear me clearly? Okay, I'll try to bring up, I'll make up for some lost time. My presentation is pretty brief, but I wanted to give you an overview and an update on the work that the Seatuck Environmental Association has had underway for the past year and a half, working with a vernal pool working group that was established that involves a lot of key partners, some of which are participating in the presentation today. In 2020, we received funding from the Long Island Community Foundation to undertake an island-wide assessment of vernal pools or vernal ponds. These are wetlands that you undoubtedly know are ephemeral in nature, typically dry out during the summer months due to a increase in evaporation and evapotranspiration rates. And because they don't hold water during that time of year, they typically don't have fish. And because they don't have fish, they can be key breeding sites for a whole host of vernal pool species, most notably amphibians, including things like the 4 ambystomid salamanders, which include tiger, marbled, spotted and blue spotted salamanders, newts, wood frogs, and a whole bunch of others. So anyway, I've been trying to actually identify every vernal pool that exists on Long Island. And we've, I think now total about 294 pools that we've identified. I know that later today, colleagues from East Hampton on the eastern end of the South Fork will be going through their town in an effort to much better refine the information that we have. So what I want to do is just show you quickly, if I can do this correctly, is to can you see this? Everybody can see the screen of Long Island, hopefully,
Yes.
with the yellow dots. So what these dots again represent are the vernal pool locations that have been placed into our database to date. If you go into the Seatuck website, you will find a lot more information that relates to latitude and longitude of these different sites, although we still do need to do a lot more of that in putting that data, as well as ground truthing these sites. What we're trying to do for the first phase of this foundation work, again, is to really identify and kind of just ground truth or just characterize to some extent what the vernal pools look like. Be surprised, but vernal pools can vary significantly in terms of their shape, their size, their topography, or the topography around them, I should say. And then, of course, vegetationally in terms of the flora, the fauna to some extent, and almost every vernal pool is unique. And so what we'll be going around is trying to just ground truth them. And what our hope is that ultimately, as part of a second phase that will continue into the future, is to be able to come up with a series of pool-specific recommendations to the owner of that pool, if you will. So if it's on public land, there may be some recommendations to better manage the pool for the benefit of these species. If it's on private land, we can do the same. One recommendation may be, of course, to try to promote its acquisition so it becomes into the public domain to better protect it. And so I just want to quickly just give you one example of what we've tried to do is, maybe you can see I've focused in on the Pine Barrens area. I haven't counted the number of vernal pools that we've been able to delineate within the kind of legal boundary of the Pine Barrens, but nevertheless, it's you can see it's certainly several dozen. And so I'll just keep getting closer, try to bring it in. And then what we need to still do is to again fully populate all of these yellow dots, if you will, with the photograph. So for example, this pond we call Southampton 3 in the Matterville Hills. You can see the photo of it going out there and just trying to, again, characterize a bit of what the pool looks like. Again, but trying to get the vegetation. And in some of these pools, we've been able to actually go in and undertake a more detailed assessment as to what the invertebrate populations are, what species are found, as well as what amphibians are found so far. Very limited though, and that's something that needs to happen much more extensively through time. So I'll just click on perhaps another one here. Let's see if we can find where this one goes. I have. I know. There we go. Let's try this one. And again, this is an effort. I want to be clear that it's not just CTOC, but is a wide variety of a large number of other individuals. I know that these, I don't know why they're not clicking on, but a lot of these, there are photographs of of these sites that have been ground truthed. Let me just take, here's one that I know that is again, a tiger salamander egg mass that was photographed, we called from Teardrop Pond, which is one of the more isolated vernal pools that exist in the Matterville Hills region of the Pine Barrens. And so that's really just a brief overview of what we're trying to do. Vernal pools are often not given, I guess, the attention that they deserve. They are really unique natural communities that have a pretty, can be diverse, but distinctive assemblage of fauna and flora. There are some rare plants in vernal pools as well that you may be familiar with. And again, our hope is that through time we can document literally every vernal pool that exists on the island and try to ensure that key decision makers have a clear awareness of what steps they could take to try to ensure their continuation in perpetuity. So that's really what I do, is just give that brief overview and be happy to answer any questions anybody might have now or at the end of the meeting. Okay, thank you, Tom.
Thank you, John. Any questions?
Yeah, Tom, John Pavsik. John, are these sites being cross-referenced to DEC freshwater wetland maps and map numbers, and also Cryan's work where he had a certain numbering system regarding tiger salamander ponds?
We've incorporated pretty much all of John's work into this. The first part of your question is something we still need to do, and I've had a number of conversations with, or a bunch of us have with Kevin Jennings at DEC, and it's a meeting we need to have to make sure that we kind of integrate all the rather voluminous amount of information we believe or understand DEC has about these vernal pools with the work that we're doing. That's a meeting that still has to happen, but we need to do that.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, John.
Okay, thank you.
Well, let's move in another direction with Mike Bettini. Sorry, I couldn't resist that.
All right, thank you, Tom. So here we go. Share screen. Continue. Okay, is this happening?
Oh, I see you.
Not yet.
No?
Mike, you might have to start over because John was unsharing his screen.
Yeah, I noticed that popped up. Okay.
Yeah, I just unshared. I might have been overlapping with you, Mike.
Okay.
There you go.
There you go. Yeah.
All right, sorry about that, folks. Okay, so I have three things to cover, a quick overview of the Long Island River Otter Project, which has been going on. I think this is our 14th year, started in 2008. And this is a photograph taken by Joe Kelly on the Nisquag River. And I put this in because I get a lot of photographs or emails. People think they've sighted river otters. And one of the key things for distinguishing the river otter from the muskrat, even though they're much different when you see them on land, in the water, it's a little tough to get relative size. But the river otter does this behavior where it raises its entire head out of the water, and you can see the entire face and part of the neck, and it's called periscoping. And the muskrat does not do that. So if you watch an otter for even 30 seconds, it usually does that. Okay, so this is the distribution map as per this spring. And in 2008, river otters were in 2 distinct clusters on the North Shore of Long Island. That was the first place they colonized. And they finally, let's see, so yeah, 12 years later, we finally documented them on the watersheds on the South Shore, just a handful. So right here, if you follow my cursor, this western area with the dotted line, that's the Connecticut River. We have a pair of otters in there. This was just documented this spring. This is the Carmen's River, which we were just talking about a lot with other topics. I have a question mark there because the distribution that I'm mapping, it's not based on just sightings, but it's based on the location of latrines, otter latrines or scent stations in those watersheds. And I visit them several times to determine them as being maintained latrines, as opposed to a juvenile that's dispersing and moving through the area. And this right here is Little Seatuck Creek. And we had, unfortunately, we had a roadkill there. We set up some cameras. We documented 2 other otters in this watershed. And the River Otter Project, one of the things that we're doing is we're trying to collect all the carcasses based on roadkills. That's the main mortality factor for otters on Long Island. And we can, from this unfortunate incident, we can get a lot of great information. And Gavin Hitchner is the vet at the Eastport Duck Lab, and he's doing all the necropsies. So we can get a lot of great information, including archiving tissue samples. We just had that presentation on different contaminants in the groundwater and the streams. And river otters are really important in terms of studying because they're non-migratory, unlike some other things like the ospreys. Those are the top of the food chain predator, and it lives within that watershed its entire life. So it's the tissue samples that we can collect, we can analyze them over time for PCBs and mercury and other different contaminants. And that reflects the health of the watershed. And when I started this project in 2008, I didn't realize this, but the DEC has a data bank of all the areas in New York State at that time that were occupied by river otters, which is mostly the eastern half of New York State. And so every watershed has otter tissue samples that they collect and they can analyze. And some of that stuff was used to monitor the mitigation measures done with the PCB contaminants in the GE Superfund site there on the Hudson River. I think that was PCBs. So if anybody sees any carcasses, if you can contact the DEC or myself, we can retrieve that. Okay, and then this is another cool project that the Nature Conservancy initiated, and it's they did a whole inventory of Suffolk County stream crossings where streams cross under roads. And they assessed the different types of culverts, and they had a couple different categories that you can see down here. One is the actual road and how important was that in terms of the transportation system. The ecological benefits of the culvert, does it allow fish passage, for example, for alewives? And then also a resilience score. How well designed is the culvert to handle potential sea level rise, projected sea level rise? And how much is the culvert, if it's undersized, going to contribute to flooding on the upstream side? So these are freshwater and tidal streams. And I circled these two places here. One, Birch Creek, that culvert leads under Route 24 and into Birch Creek Pond. We had a roadkill otter there. And on the south side of the road, it's a very small concrete dam, but it's a wall. Basically, the otters can't get over that. So they can't use the culvert to get from point A to point B. They have to get out of the water and cross the road. And same thing up here in Sawmill Creek, although we haven't documented a roadkill here, but that's a potential problem site. So I was able to get my data based on river otter home ranges and work that into the ecological benefit if there was a problem where the otters would have to get out of the road. Get out of the water to cross the road. So this is the Little Seatuck site. Above me is the roadbed, and this is a dam, and then a culvert that becomes tide water. And so we just made a simple little thing out of concrete block and set up some cameras to see if they would use this. I had a pretty good sense that their own curiosity and playfulness would attract them to use this. And sure enough, a couple weeks later, we got a video of the two otters that are still in that home range using this. So that's great. And we want to look at other mitigation measures elsewhere to reduce the number of roadkills in the future. And then moving on to the coyote study, we have a Long Island Coyote Study Group made up of all these groups down in the bottom there, and we meet once a month. We divvied up sections of Long Island to do various projects with remote cameras and collecting coyote scat. Our goals are to document the establishment of a breeding population here on Long Island. And really right now, I mean, that's important. So we have people out, like I said, with the camera traps and collecting scat for analysis. But right now, the main goal of our group, a really important thing, is to educate Long Islanders on how to coexist with coyotes. I mean, Long Island is the last major landmass in the lower 48 states that hasn't been colonized by coyotes. So for several decades, a lot of other areas like Long Island have learned to deal with living with coyotes, but it's going to be a challenge here. And there's some do's and don'ts that we want to educate folks on. We assume that the source of coyotes that are colonizing Long Island is the 4 or 5 breeding pairs in the Bronx. They've been there for almost a decade. We also have breeding coyotes on Fisher's Island, which an often forgotten part of Long Island and Nassau County and Suffolk Town, Southold Town. So we have some folks over there collecting scat and setting up cameras. And we don't really, the locals seem to think, or at least some people think there's as many as 3 breeding pairs there. It's highly unlikely because it's only 2 square miles. But we can, the American Museum of Natural History is analyzing the scats, and they can actually get us the DNA fingerprints so we can get the actual number of animals and their relatedness to the Bronx population, which is kind of cool. And we're also taking some of the scat material and doing a year-round diet analysis. So here's where we're at on Long Island right now. We have a cluster of pairs over here in northwestern Nassau County. We have, as far as we know, we have 3 pairs up in this area. And there's a lone coyote in the Queens area. Again, this arrow is showing where we think the source of coyotes for Long Island is coming from. And one of the things in the literature they point out is that the juveniles will disperse up to 100 miles. So all of Long Island is within reach of dispersing coyotes. We do have a solo coyote on Fire Island that's being monitored. And it appears that we have a pair of coyotes up here in Southold. I have a question mark up here as to whether or not the coyotes have swum over to Fisher's Island, obviously, from Connecticut, Rhode Island, Maine. That's a 2-mile swim. And there's some question as to whether or not they could make it over through the archipelago, as beaver and otter have seemed to have done. And we can figure that out from the DNA analysis. So that'll be some pretty cool information. So any of the pups that are born on Fisher's Island are most likely going to have to take to the water to disperse because the island is so small. So we started out with our first breeding pair near LaGuardia Airport a couple of years ago, and that didn't end well. And that's one of the reasons why we're really pushing the educational part of living with coyotes. So it was near the employee parking lot, and the employees, once the pups, there were 8 pups, and the male and the female, and then a subadult helper. So a total of 11 animals. And the employees started tossing them food, and they got habituated to being around people, and that was a problem. So the decision was made to kill them. They got all but one. One seemed to have escaped. So this is Lisa Filippi on the left from Hofstra. She's monitoring a site in Nassau County with cameras and also collecting the scat. And this is a photo of the scat from one of the Nassau County sites. There's a lot of overlap with red fox, but you can see that this is way bigger than a red fox. So there is a range above which it's definitely going to be coyote scat. And we've unfortunately missed out on collecting some carcasses. This is a carcass over on Fisher's Island that we couldn't retrieve. And this is one just from a couple of weeks ago out in Montauk on Block Island Sound. And this is why we're wondering, well, this particular one here, there was a third carcass we missed as well on Long Island Sound Beach. So we can get a lot of cool information from this. And we need to get the word out that if anyone cites a carcass to contact the DEC or anyone on the Long Island Coyote Study Group, and we can get out there and retrieve that. And then last, I just wanted to mention, I think on the agenda it talked about the weasels in particular, but I've always wanted to update Paul Connor's work. This is a publication from 1971, but it was his field work done in the mid-60s. So that's, half a century old. and it's a great resource. The DEC has a small mammal survey that's going on in all of New York State. There's some question as to whether they're going to be able to get to Long Island to do anything, but there were plans to come here. And everything was thrown into, the wrench that was thrown into the whole timetable with COVID. But Amanda Cheeseman from ESF is the head of this project, and she's training people to follow certain protocols and in doing the small mammal survey. And I've spoken with her, and she is interested and willing to come down to Long Island and train some of us in doing this work. And I think some folks from the Central Pine Barrens Commission might be interested in doing the workshop. It's a several-day workshop, learning how to set up the array. So there's the design element, and then there's how do you process the animals that are caught in the traps. And so that would be really interesting to do. And I'm hoping to set that up in 2022. And in addition to that, using remote cameras, I'd like to look at a couple species that we really don't have a lot of good information. We really don't have any good information on. So up here is the long-tail weasel. I've only seen 2 in all my years here in the field. Striped skunk, I know they're here. I've actually never seen one. The gray fox down here in the lower right, most of us thought this had been extirpated from Long Island until roadkill showed up in the Manorville area in 1995. So they seem to be hanging on. And then the mink. Again, I've seen mink, but in doing the river otter survey, I've been really surprised that I have not seen any sign of mink. And this is the same kind of habitat, the riparian zone habitat. So these are all animals that are on the allowable harvest. They're allowed to be trapped on Long Island. And I don't think that we have enough information about their distribution and abundance to justify that. You know, let's try and get that together. And I hope some of you be interested in helping out with that. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Mike, I noticed you made no mention of the Middle Island area. I believe Tim Green, didn't you have pictures of coyote off Wading River Hollow Road?
Yeah, I can answer that. So we did have photographs of coyotes there. We had photographs for about 7 years of at least one coyote on the South Fork as well. And then in 2019, the end of 2019, we got a photograph of a pair of coyotes on the South Fork in the western end of the South Fork. And I've been in charge of surveying them because I live in East Hampton. So I've been, you know, out looking for a sign of them for quite a while. And they've just disappeared. I don't know if that's what we're seeing now on the North Fork or what happened there. But the point is, so what a lot of what we're seeing are dispersing juvenile coyotes, and they may not have settled down. So the Middle Island coyotes, we don't have any information about them still being in the area.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Okay.
All right, thanks again, Mike. Sean, Forest Restoration and Monitoring.
Thanks, Tom, and thanks, Mike. And yeah, we're definitely interested over here at the Pine Barrens as far as helping out with that study. I think that's a great effort to update Connor's work. So thanks for taking the lead on that. All right, so I'm gonna try to do what I can here to pick up some time. I know we're running behind, but really some great presentations. So appreciate everybody's input on that. All right, so just quickly here, some of our updates on forest restoration and monitoring. Want to include that nice picture last week of the Hudsonia ericoides out in the dwarf pine plains here, really nice flush. And so the things I wanted to go over, the forest health monitoring study, an update on where that's at, some monitoring as far as the prescribed fire program goes, looking at a study that was done, and we finally got the data wrapped up for post-SPB pitch pine restoration planting, and then some talk about status on a grant program we applied to last year with some partners. So I think as most of you know here, and we did give an update at the 2019 meeting on the long-term forest health monitoring project, and that was originally developed through several partners, Fern, PLC partnerships. And so that was the original study over 90 plots that was looking at diverse measurements for species, cover, density, and a variety of other metrics to kind of get some baseline data to look at these long-term trends in a variety of different ecotypes throughout the Pine Barrens. And so the second follow-up phase, the original intention was every 10 years. BNL was able to work on the plots at that 10-year interval on their lands. In 2015, they updated that. The rest of it couldn't fall into place until beginning in 2019, when half of the 90 plots were able to be resampled. And then in 2020, Brookhaven was restricted from their science undergraduate laboratory internship due to COVID concerns. But the commission, with some adequate protocols in place and primarily meeting out in the field with distancing and thing, we were able to hire interns in 2020, Sabrina Cohn, Cassidy Robinson, and Sabrina Falzone. And Sabrina is who just joined us yesterday as our new permanent part-time ecological field specialist. So in 2020, they were able to wrap up all the remaining plots in that. ESF PhD candidate Joanna Lumsden Pinto out of the Martin Dubček lab was kind of their field supervisor. And she's working on the data analysis from those 90 plots as part of her dissertation. So I just kind of want to update the status. Our plans are to invite her, Joanna, and Martin to present the results at next year's PLC meeting. So we're really looking forward to seeing some of the trends through time and the status of the forest health over that time in the Pine Barrens, and kind of using that as a tool to help inform management, and then see where we go from there at the next sampling interval. Just really quickly, Bob Pankow gave a great presentation of where we're at with the prescribed fire program and our kind of plans over the next decade. And I just wanted to touch a little bit on a monitoring program associated with that, since that's really integral in kind of building this framework and foundation for this prescribed fire program being an adaptive program. Without the history of continuous fire and varying conditions on the island, there's just a lot to learn, and it's pretty exciting. In some of these smaller scale burns we'll be doing, there's a lot to learn about seasonality, different conditions, different fire behavior, what kind of ecological results and impacts from fire that we're going to see over time. So that's going to be an integral part of it, and over time that's going to help us refine and improve the program and to meet different objectives using fire at different times and different intensities and different locations. So, and that's going to be a variety of protocols they're going to use, several from the Forest Service, some from Fish and Wildlife Service and National Park Service, some of Bill Patterson's protocols from UMass, and then the Polos and Barton xeric habitats in the Northeast, several protocols in there. So trying to find a way to use a variety of these protocols that can be compared across to other agencies and landowners in kind of this landscape scale approach. As far as this post-SPB restoration planting study, this was initial response to kind of the need for empirical data on pitch pine planting success after SPB infestations. The DEC data showed there's really a lack of natural pine regeneration in these stands for a variety of features. Namely, you're getting that overstory removal in a lot of these places, but yet the understory still has dense understory with duff layers. You're not getting that mineral soil kind of disturbance. So pitch pine regeneration really struggles in there with the existing competition on the understory that's not removed. So the study was kind of set up to look at how effective it would be to help restore these sites by directly planting pitch pine seedlings in. in these total beetle kill suppression stands. And the one chosen for the study was in Hubbard County Park. And this was a collaboration between Suffolk County Parks, DEC, ourselves at the Pine Barrens, and the town of Brookhaven. And in the study, 300 seedlings were planted. Of those, 375 individuals were followed for this study. And then it was also used to look at the effectiveness of caging the seedlings for deer browse, because pitch pines aren't traditionally a palatable species for deer browse, but with the high prevalence of deer on Long Island, it was kind of desired in the study to see, if caging the trees might help the overall survivorship, and then kind of give us a gauge on the pressure from deer browse. And so just quickly look at the results. In that study, ended up with a total sample size of 73, lost a couple early that weren't included in the study, but yeah, 39 caged trees, 34 caged, 39 not caged. And then of the not caged trees, 36 of those were browsed and only 3 not browsed, where we see kind of the reverse pattern, 5 browsed that were caged, and largely that was from tree growth outside of the cage. So we're seeing the percent browse in the not caged almost 92%. We're only 15% in the caged trees. And if we look at percent survivorship, we're saying 49% survivorship in not caged trees, where it was increased to about 71% in the caged. And over this sample size, that p-value is kind of right straddling the line of being, statistically significant. At that 90% level, we're making it. 95%, not quite so much, but that's pretty good in field data for saying there's a relationship there with the increased survivorship, whether that's due to browse or due to some other things, maybe support from storm support or some other extraneous variables that the cages may help provide. But clearly we're seeing incredibly significant reduction in browse from the caged species. And then the bottom table, that kind of changes the response variable from the cage to the browsed and not browsed, or the explanatory variable, excuse me. And so in that case, we're almost seeing the same. If a tree is browsed, we're seeing about half of them survive, where if it's not browsed, we're seeing about 72% survival roughly over its population. And again, that's right, we're straddling the line at that 95% confidence level. So, and we went one step further. This was actually Broderick DeAngelis that I mentioned earlier, has left to go to Oregon Forest Service, kind of looking at this quick cost benefit analysis, trying to factor in labor costs and cage costs and tree costs. So kind of the big takeaway of the total cost when you factor in labor and cage investment. Now, of course, one thing is that cages are more durable and they can be used multiple seasons. So they're really beneficial in the first couple seasons in a restoration planting, but those can be reused. So it's not a total lost cause if in a restoration project we wanted to use cages on trees. But really, when you factor all that in, the increased time to put cages in and maintain cages over time, if you're looking to plant basically an acre, we're using a rough planting for survivorship with those numbers we got. And the costs, if you don't cage any of the trees, but you plant more to make up for losses, about $750 for that acre. Whereas if you cage all of them, just over $1,000 an acre, and then half caged, about $929 an acre. So sometimes Saratoga Nursery does run out. They've been working on ramping up their tree production for pitch pine restoration. I know Fish and Wildlife Service was looking to do a restoration project this spring, but Saratoga had been sold out by the time they went to put their order in. So you can make the case that, just putting in extra trees to make up for that loss from deer browse or just natural mortality versus the labor required in the cages. So I think it's an important consideration to think about. You do get better survivorship, so you're possibly a better steward of the tree resources, but then again, it's a trade-off with the cost that's coming out a little bit more expensive to cage them. And so really the key takeaways here, I think, is that planting the pitch pine seedlings is going to lead to a better ability to restore these sites. Working on natural regeneration with the duff layer and the understory competition is just probably not going to be successful. We're seeing, based on our study in the DEC, deer pressure It's variable, the palatability, they will eat them as we're seeing here, the high browse on the uncaged, depending on the season, the scarcity of other food resources and the deer population. And then kind of, I touched on the investment in cages and the decisions, and then really more study on other possible treatments and restoration. This is a single site snapshot. And so I wanted to use this interim study as a segue into this Forest Health Protection Special Technology Development Program grant we applied to. And kind of their canned overall synopsis is that the objective is to quickly move mature research findings into practical applications by developing or improving technologies that increase our ability to manage and restore forest systems through prevention, detection, and response to forest insects, pathogens, and invasive species. So that kind of synopsis and a mouthful of a sentence. Working with Forest Service, they thought, some of these issues that we're facing with pitch pine restoration would be, a great candidate for this program. So we did apply, and I wanted to send a big thanks out to several of the PLC member partners for providing letters of support to help this proposal find favor. So BNL, Fish and Wildlife Service, Park Service, County Parks, DEC, towns of Brookhaven and Southampton, and state parks all helped us with some letters of support for this. And our goals are to assess the pitch pine regeneration in unmanaged and actively managed forest stands, and then looking at testing various regeneration techniques, including prescribed fire, some of that mastication work, overstory removal, and tree planting for seedling establishment in areas that were impacted by SPB. And then kind of producing this technical guide that's going to outline best management practices for that restoration and maintenance to help improve the recovery and regeneration of these pitch pine forests that can be used on Long Island, but as well as other places in the Northeast that face some potential of southern pine beetle impact. So we're collaborating with the Forest Service. Our sponsor was Kevin Dodds, research entomologist with Forest Service, and then Tony D'Amato with the University of Vermont. He's worked on some other pine beetle related issues with students up there. And then, of course, a lot of the plots, we're going to be reaching out to different landowning agencies on Long Island towards establishing some plots in new places, as well as where current management and SPB impacts have been witnessed. So our proposal ranked #1 regionally and was sent to the national considerations, and they only funded 5 projects this year, and ours was one of them. So I really appreciate everybody's support and helping that happen. And I think we'll learn a lot and provide some valuable insight to, helping to recover the forest after SPB using these various tools. So that $90,000 project is going to help fund a graduate student, a master's student for 2 years. And Pine Barrens Commission and some other partners will be working on data collection and plot design and metrics over the coming couple of years. We look to start that either in the fall or the spring, depending on graduate student recruitment at University of Vermont. And so really that's what I've got. So I know that was a race in there, and please feel free to ask questions or get in touch with us about any of those things going forward. But yeah, trying to get through and save some time here. So thanks so much.
Sean, this is Mike Bettini. I'm wondering, did you look at natural regeneration? I mean, there was an assumption made that the pitch pine is not going to regenerate because there's not enough exposed mineral soil. But did you incorporate that into your study design?
Not in this one, because this study was really based on previous work that DEC had been doing from 2016 to 2018 of looking at these pitch pine impacted stands and not seeing any or very low amounts of pitch pine regeneration. So that's what was the impetus for this study of kind of saying, hey, can we look at planting pitch pines and look at the efficacy of that approach, since we're really not seeing the natural regen. So DEC's got a pretty good compilation of data from various SPB impacted stands with that natural regeneration data.
Okay. That's not what I'm seeing in the northwest area of East Hampton. Although myself and a couple other folks that are much more botanically trained than I am, it was difficult to identify the first year growth as either pitch pine or white pine.
Mike and Sean, this is Andy Drake from Town of East Hampton. I'm a manager of preserved lands owned by the town. I just wanted to point out, and Mike, this is probably what you're seeing, but we planted thousands of pine saplings that we purchased from the Saratoga Tree Nursery, both pitch pines and white pines in the Northwest area. So I'm not sure where you were looking, if it was Swamp Road or 114, but naturally we saw the same thing, not a lot of natural regeneration there. And over the last 2-3 years, we had volunteers, we had students from East Hampton, we had Trails Preservation Society, we had several others help with reforestation efforts there. And I know just on the one property at Curtis where we had DEC help with the suppression, we planted 1,000, combination of 500 white pines and 500 pitch pine saplings there recently. So you'll be seeing both.
This is definitely not planted material. This is these were tiny first year growth.
I mean, some of the seedlings we get from DEC, I'm not sure if you've seen them, but they're about this big. I mean, the root system is much larger than the actual above ground tree, but they're often very small.
And we are continuing to look for that, Mike. It's that was early on, the first couple of years after the SPB impact. So, that is worked in. There's lots of controls worked into this special technology development program grant funding. So we're continuing to look for that, and seeing what the balance is between, effort to reforest these versus now we've got a little bit longer time from some of these original impacted sites from 2016. Now 5 years on, we can really go back and look over time too, because now we've got this kind of stratified sampling of different years of when those impacts took place, and we can kind of quantify with a little more rigor what the recruitment over time is. So that a lot of that we're hoping to kind of reinforce some of that data and create a larger sample size across more time points. So that's definitely part of it, and I agree. So it's good to keep in mind.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. LISMA update. Bill and Abby?
Thanks, Tom. Good morning, everyone. I'm Bill Jacobs, Program Manager for LISMA. We have 3 full-time staff now, myself, Abby Besrutzik, and Haley Gladich. We're doing more these days with social media and videos. This is a video that Abby produced with partners to promote Invasive Species Awareness Week, which is next week. I'll just show you a bit of the beginning of it.
Make a difference in your community by taking part in New York's annual Invasive Species Awareness Week, New York ISAW, from June 6th through the 12th.
Invasive species can harm the environment, the economy, and human health. Aquatic plants can take over our waterways, impeding recreation. Invasive insects like spotted lanternfly threaten grapes, apples, and other agricultural crops, along with our forests.
Make a difference in your
We're on Facebook and Instagram, and we've recently started on TikTok. And Haley is in charge of TikTok. She produces 30-second videos. We're trying to reach a younger audience. And within a month since we've been on TikTok, we've gained more than 1,500 followers. And our top video has received 52,000 views and has had more than 10,000 likes. We're planning education and outreach to reduce the dumping of landscape debris, to improve home landscape management practices, to prevent the spread of invasive species, and also to help conserve native species. We have a busy field season underway. We're focusing on 3 broad areas. First is to survey for emerging invasive species. These are tier 2 species on our tier ranking list. Included among them are spotted lanternfly and small carpet grass. There are several other species, and we track emerging species using IMAP Invasives and iNaturalist. Second is surveying and monitoring at priority conservation areas. We still have our 12 invasive species management zones, or ISPZs. We've grouped these into 6 management complexes. The Central Pine Barrens is one of these management complexes. And we also survey and monitor multiple natural heritage sites. Some of the species we monitor are southern pine beetle and miscanthus. Third, we assist partners with invasive species management plans and make recommendations for control. A big push this year is to survey for spotted lanternfly. Department of Agriculture, state parks, DEC, and other partners have set up a grid system on Long Island, and we're asking for agencies and volunteers to claim a grid cell and pick 3 points within the cell to survey for spotted lanternfly every few weeks or a couple of months. More information can be found at the New York imapinvasives.org website. This is one of the species we're very interested in, concerned about this season, small carpet grass or Arthraxon. It's currently only found in 2 places in Long Island that we know of. It's likely underreported. We found it at Montauk County Park and also in the Pine Barrens next to Gabreski Airport. It likes wet soils. It's a low-growing annual grass with short, wide leaves with bases that encircle the stem, and there's conspicuous hairs along the margins. It looks a little bit like native deer tongue grass, but the leaves are on deer tongue grass are much longer. They're shorter and smaller on the carpet grass. For aquatic field plans, we're surveying priority water bodies. We've worked with the Long Island Metro Aquatic Invasive Species Task Force and prioritized a list of more than 700 water bodies on Long Island. I would like to talk to John at some point about adding vernal ponds. There's only 1 vernal pond on the list so far. We're planning on conducting aquatic invasive species surveys using a rake toss method along with the SAS Pro app, which is Simple Aquatic Survey. We'll be surveying various water bodies, including coastal plain ponds in the central Pine Barrens. And we're also interested in learning about the distribution of watercress in the Carmans River and elsewhere. We've completed a new statewide invasive species tier ranking list, working with other PRISM partners around the state. There's a website that the Natural Heritage Program has where you can see all 8 PRISMs, all their invasive species. It can be filtered and sorted various different ways. And we also have an updated list, tier ranking list of invasive species at our website, lisma.org. Upcoming LISMA partner meetings. Next meeting is September 17th. We're including now workshops after each meeting with presentations on current topics related to invasive species. And we're also planning an annual conference for October. This will include invasive species and native species. So if anyone is interested in presenting or has a topic to suggest, please get in touch with us. And that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Bill. Okay, who's up next? Spotted lanternfly.
My name is Tom Algeier. I'm the invasive species coordinator with New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets, specifically within the Division of Plant Industry. I know spotted lanternfly has been mentioned a couple times. It's an invasive plant hopper introduced from Asia into the United States, into Berks County, Pennsylvania in 2014. It has slowly spread outward since then. It arrived on our doorstep here in New York last spring with detections in Richmond County or Staten Island, and a few others along the New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania border. We're also concerned with a detection in Connecticut, just literally a few hundred yards east of the New York state line in the vicinity of the Westchester Airport. So that's just a little brief little background on spotted lanternfly. So what we're seeing at this point of the year is emergence. So the egg masses are beginning to emerge. Both of these pictures are from New York from the last few weeks. Dr. Kristen Weichert took this picture that we've never seen actually this before. Very similar to other insects, when they first hatch, their exoskeleton is very soft and lacks color. So these are very, very newly hatched first instar spotted lanternfly. They're white, almost translucent, and then you can see on the right side they're starting to darken up and get their white spots. So these were probably just minutes old from hatching out of the egg mass. And this was taken in on Staten Island. Typically what you see is more to the right here, where they're very small, tick-like, very, very tiny black insects with white spots. They're very hard to detect in the environment. Once they hatch, they don't really stay clustered like this. This is, again, a newly hatched egg mass. You can see the remnants of the egg. They're kind of surrounding the old egg mass there. So once they hatch, they disperse into the environment, and they're very difficult to detect in their first, second, and third instar, which is the black and white nymph stage. So this is the life stage that we're at now, is transitioning from eggs to first instar nymphs, and they'll continue to grow from there. One of the things that we're doing is besides visual surveys, we're trapping. We're really not using the bug barriers to the right, or the previous iteration of that was a sticky tape, a sticky band. The sticky bands had too many issues with bird and mammal bycatch, so we went to the bug barriers. So we are using up our stock of bug barriers, but primarily what we're using is the trap on the left. We call it a circle trap. So it's basically a mesh funnel. So the insects naturally, part of their habit is to migrate up and down tree trunks. So as they migrate up the tree trunk, they're funneled into this mesh trap. There's a bag at the top that you can see zip tied to a kind of a choke point. So they go through that funnel at the tip of the mesh opening, and they're collected into a plastic bag. And these are monitored about every 2 weeks by our staff. We're expecting to deploy about 20 traps in the Long Island area. So Nassau and Suffolk should have about 20 of these traps this year. And survey is continuing on, although right now the bulk of our survey is in the Westchester area, just due to limited resources. Here you can see a little bit of a close-up of the first instar nymph, so the black and white stage. What it's perched on is actually spruce needles. So if you can picture a spruce needle and zoom in, that's the size of these insects, about the diameter of a spruce needle. Very, very hard to detect in their first few, in the first few instars. Once they start getting a little bit larger, when they reach their fourth instar, they actually have red coloring on their wing pads. They're a lot more easy to visually detect in the environment at that point. So no new detections downstate. Currently, the only ones in the Long Island region, again, are in on Staten Island. There's a few in Westchester and Westchester and Queens, but no established populations there. The only established population we know in the downstate area at this point is Staten Island, but we continue to monitor. So that's my brief update on spotted lanternfly for the Long Island area. If anybody has any questions.
Okay. All right, thanks, Tom. Jay Blenow, more invasive coming up.
Hello, give me 1 second. Make sure I'm sharing it. Can you guys see my presentation?
Yes.
Yep.
Awesome. All right, so I'm Jade Blenow. I am the Ecological Field Specialist under the Science and Stewardship Division at the Central Pine Barrens Commission. It's nice to meet all of you. I'm going to be talking a little bit about invasive species that we've been working on the last couple of months. So first up, we have caper spurge. So this is a species that we have really been employing these EDR tactics. That's the early detection, rapid response. Polly Wiegand first found a population of these in East Quogue around 2017, and then later in 2018, she found it in the Hampton Bays transfer station. This we really considered to be a high risk of spread, and so ever since we've been doing lots of pullings there. And our most recent visit, we've had a really low abundance. We started with pulling thousands in the last year, and now we're down to like less than 50. So this is something to look out for. It's fairly new, and we hope that both of these populations will no longer be a problem in the next couple of months. We'll see. Next up, I'm going to talk a little about miscanthus. So miscanthus is an ornamental grass that can escape and really cause a problem in our native grasslands. And so we've been doing diggings around Eastport Conservation Area, Fresh Ponds, Rocky Point, Whiskey Road, Kearns Field, Pine Meadows, and Calverton National Cemetery. So luckily, in addition to our efforts in digging that we really focus on in fall in order to prevent that seed from spreading, we had a meeting with DOT and PSEG, and they are on the lookout for this invasive species along our right-of-ways in our local area and roadways. Next up is glossy buckthorn. So this is an area that we have been looking at in the Rocky Point Demo Forest and south of Kearns Field. So we've been finding in this lower picture, you can see how large these individuals are. We're finding large adults along the trails and burn breaks. And as you walk into the forest, you can find expanding patches of these seedlings that are really dense in some areas. And so this is especially concerning because these areas are destined to be burned in our fire management plans. So we're looking to create a fire management program that considers and assists with our invasive species efforts. So moving forward, now that we know that this population is here, we want to have additional surveying so we really know what we're working with and create a plan that takes this into account, as these plants, once they meet fire, have the ability to kill off our seedlings, but fire can have the adults re-sprout, and with the newly available resources and space, they can really take off. So we want to create plans that will take this into account before we start burning. Next, we're going to talk about this viburnum species. So just for some context, this map is along Sunrise Highway and Bellows Pond Road. This is just southeast of Sears Bellows County Park. So this area, we took a walk through and we did some surveying. We found thousands of this very interesting viburnum species that is displaying this invasive characteristic. So you can see within these polygons, there were hundreds to thousands of individual plants all along Sunrise Highway. So we used the Cornell Express key. We tried to ID out which species of viburnum it is that we found. And so these are pictures of some plants that we took, and we're thinking that it could be Viburnum carlisii, but there's so many, and they have the ability to hybridize between Carcephalum and into Cayuga species. And so in order to really understand what is out there, we have a possible collaboration with the Cold Spring Harbor Labs to do DNA barcoding and species identification to know exactly what it is that's out there that's acting so like such an invasive, and that we are a bit worried about. So along that area, we found that that edge population is not only having these super large adults that are putting out tons of seed and creating all of the seedlings, and as you walk into the wooded areas, they really take hold. There's sections along that highway as you walk into the wooded section that are completely monocultured, just the viburnum. So this has really high impact and has the potential to change the forest floors along these areas. So we are looking into future management and what we can do, but we want to make sure that everyone is looking out for these viburnums that have the ability to hybridize, and to just check on them and make sure that if you see viburnums near you, that they're not displaying this very invasive behavior. So that's all I have. And in the essence of time, I'm going to take questions in the chat, and we're going to turn it over to Tim Huss, I believe. Thank you guys so much.
Yes, thank you.
Good to be back with the group. You know, we continue to have 3 officers here, myself, Jim Mazzio, and Gary Enright. Jim was a former member of the Southampton Police. He was a detective there for 26 years, I think he had with them. And Gary Enright worked with me at DEC for a couple of decades. So it's nice to have him on board here. He replaced Mike Lewis, who some of you may remember. Mike was a former member of the state police and moved on to Florida, where he sends us pictures now of alligators and poisonous snakes in his yard. So he's having a good time down there. But I just want to emphasize that our primary mission, continues to be to assure compliance with the Article 57 of the Conservation Law, having to do with various land use activities, development, projects, and so on. And so in that effort, our work with the town code enforcement, building and planners divisions of those towns is very important. And we continue that work. We will often get complaints here that the towns, sometimes we get them from the town actually, but there are frequently investigations that we get complaints here that they're not aware of. We bring them to their attention. We depend on them to help us resolve these issues. So, and the good thing about that is, and for a lot of things I'll talk about here this morning, we're the boots on the ground. We're able to document firsthand these complaints, turn that information over to the towns and the other agencies that help us, and also more importantly, continue to follow up with the towns and the other agencies to kind of keep the investigations updated, on their agenda. Everybody's busy. So frequently our reminders to our partners helps to refresh the efforts there. And so we feel good about that. We've had commercial businesses locally here encroaching on county land, for example. We've had some serious encroachments going back to 3 or 4 years ago when we first started here. A couple of acres, well over 2 acres of county parkland, where real significant relatively old growth oak trees were removed. And working with the AG, we were able to resolve that with a $50,000 fine and restoration. So that was one of our larger ones, but there's a lot of smaller ones too that kind of add up in the big picture. So those are very important cases to us, and we will continue to do that. We support the programs here, our science and stewardship people, conservation easement inspections with Jerry Taverdi, very important program. And we've had to work with the commission to resolve some of those easement issues. And we've kind of renewed the effort here over the last couple of years that we've been here, the last 3 or 4 years, when John was here, to renew that effort to document what's going on in the easements. And I think we continue to improve on that, because early on, some of these easements way back were made, and there wasn't always good documentation of what was there and what has happened. So the increased effort with the easement inspections is going a long way to assure that the easement program remains viable and valid. So that's been a good program for us. We've been busy. we had over 78 cases last year. We're already over 20 here now. Most of them, a lot of them are the dumping cases that you've probably heard a lot about. We get a lot of publicity over it. We had 3 press releases this year already, which is good. We think it helps deter what's going on. At some of our sites, we've seen changes. We've had some very active sites that have gone cold. And then we have a couple of active sites that remain active. So we do it with our camera surveillance. It's been very effective. I mean, it's a simple trail cams. They're very effective. And we've been able to work with our LEC, our Law Enforcement Council. Without them, we wouldn't be able to accomplish what we have. They have been very willing to do this for us, and they get a lot of satisfaction, as most of us would, I guess, at catching illegal dumpers. And I'm not talking littering. I'm talking, 5 or 10 yarders dumped anything from that size to pickup truckloads. So, and it's significant. We have a lot of cases are dumping cases. I have to admit, well over 50% of our cases this year were having to do with illegal dumping. And we just recently put a press release out. It didn't garner as much attention as the previous 2. I think because we had 2 kind of significant ones, press releases in Newsday in February and March. So this 3rd one got less play, although somebody did tell me they heard a brief splash about it on one of the local radio stations out east. And I'm not sure where else, but no, we thought it was significant that in April, pretty much the month of April alone, we captured, or I should say we apprehended 6 individuals at different times, different locations, but all total working with primarily DEC, but also our other members in the LEC. But DEC ended up settling a lot of these cases, collected over $12,000 in penalties in that 1 month. So it just goes to show you how active it can be. So anyway, we will continue that program. In fact, we're going to get a couple more cameras. We've been lucky. We've only lost 2 cameras in the 4 years what we've been doing this. So we feel fortunate about that. The cameras are not real expensive. They're give or take around $100, but of course we don't like to lose equipment. And then I will mention that, as you know, Pine Barrens is created around the protection of our groundwater. So we do work with our Suffolk County Water Authority to help them maintain their facilities, especially the ones in the Pine Barrens. And we've had trees clear cut, we've had encroachments from neighbors, fences cut down, land cleared on Water Authority property. So we have helped them to address those issues. So we feel that's important too. We had one up in Medford that had some significant environmental problems with illegal dumping from neighboring commercial enterprises. And actually that one parcel up off of Route 112 there, on each side of the property, it's an undeveloped Water Authority property, but on each side there was environmental degradation. On one side was actually a major DEC issue with the dumping of tons and tons of illegal waste, regulated waste. And we are coming to resolution on that, thanks to the DEC. So I'll just give you a little update on our drone program. I think we've, probably aware, we started the drone program about 2 years ago. We went up to Oriskany Homeland Security Center, and we were trained to get our FAA 107 license. So myself and Jim Mazzio are pilots, licensed, and Sean and Polly, and John was there too. We when he was still here, and so now we have 4 licensed pilots here. We were kind of stymied by the COVID. We couldn't get together and do the skills training as much as we wanted during COVID. It kind of got shut down, but we're back. Lieutenant Frank Carbone is our primary instructor, and he's been great. And we're finally flying our Mavic, which is our more complex drone that has a good camera, infrared, and so on. So we're confident that we're going to be able to support the programs here with that, especially the science and stewardship, prescribed burns, and that kind of thing. So we're looking forward to continuing that. And finally, we're working with IT at the Water Authority to improve how we collect our data. Some of the stuff we've been using here for years and years before I got here even, and we've adapted it. Some of it we've changed, but it's very labor intensive. It's pretty much inserting the information and trying to keep it up to date, by hand. So we are working with IT. I'm very optimistic talking to them over there that we're going to get a much easier and efficient way to collect this data using their systems. So we have a meeting with them next week again, and hopefully we can give more accurate reports that are more meaningful to people outside of the law enforcement realm here. So if anybody has any questions, let me know, and thank you for the time.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Not on the agenda, but on the subject of enforcement, we have Artie Penzick from the Law Enforcement Council. Artie?
Hey, good morning, everyone. A lot of new people, new faces here. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Artie Penzick. I'm the Deputy Director for the Suffolk County Park Rangers. Before that, I served 43 years with the Suffolk County Park Police, and I've been on the Pine Barrens Law Enforcement Council for past 19 years. And during that time, I've headed up the Pine Barrens Law Enforcement Council Multi-Agency ATV Task Force. This is a task force where all the major law enforcement agencies in the Pine Barrens that have jurisdiction, we get together on a regular basis, and we go out and we're looking for, within the Pine Barrens and around it, the illegal ATVs, off-road vehicles, illegal dumpers, and any other violations that occur within the Pine Barrens. I usually get into, since we haven't had a meeting in quite a while, I want to go over last year's statistics and stuff. Last year we did do 25 multi-agency ATV details. Activity was up considerably. Reason for this, I believe, was with the advent of the coronavirus, most indoor activities came to a halt. As such, outdoor activities increased dramatically. And among this was the ATVs. In fact, I know of one case of a dealership up west, an ATV dealership that was on the verge of bankruptcy. And when the virus hit, the ATV sales escalated so much that they had one of the best years ever in their history. And ATV sales, ATV activity, it just went right off the roof. During this time, we did the 25 details. We got a total of 107 impounded ATVs. For those of you not aware of the ATVs, this is a very relatively small number of the ATVs that we encounter. Most of the ATVs, almost all of them, when they encounter any law enforcement, they're going to run. They know the fines and the penalties are very steep. They know they're hard to identify since they're not usually registered. They wear helmets. We can't identify them. They actually taunt police and law enforcement all the time. And they're very brazen going through the Pine Barrens and even riding on the public highways these days. Out of the 107 ATVs that we did impound, there were 44 quads, 56 dirt bikes. We even got 5 enduros. They look just like dirt bikes, but they're street legal. They're registered, insured, inspected, so they can ride on the street. But once they go into the woods off-road, they're an ATV and we handle them as such. We also got 1 trike and even a go-kart. Like I say, this 107 ATV impounds was almost double from the year before. In fact, it was the largest amount of law enforcement we've had in the past 13 years. Also with the ATVs that were impounded on the details, all the individual law enforcement agencies that are out there working, they do their share of impounds and other enforcement on their own patrol duties. I don't have the numbers for these agencies, but for the Suffolk County Park Rangers, I can tell you that we did an additional 24 ATV impounds between, like I say, the details and what the Rangers did. That's over 130 there. And you add up what the other agencies probably did. That's a considerable amount of ATVs that have been out there. And like I say, it just shows you how bad the problem has gotten. Also out of the impounds, all those 107 that were given, that were impounded, they were issued a total of 215 related summonses to go with that. So the fines that are generated and the impound fees and stuff are quite considerable. And that doesn't include the other major problem that we have with the off-road vehicles. That's a considerable thing. Since 2011, where the county passed laws with off-road use being almost similar to that of the ATVs, they're not allowed to ride on public lands, and they're not allowed to ride on private lands without the written landowner's consent. We've been dealing with them. Last year alone, we had 46 illegal off-road vehicles, or ORVs as we call them. And they were handled, and we've had a few dumpers and numerous other violations. So, like I say, the guys on the Law Enforcement Council and all the agencies out there, they're doing one heck of a job. So far this year, our results have been a little low. We did 11 details to date, but on 5 of those details, the weather was extremely inclement. And usually in weather like that, ATV activity is less. So the numbers that I'm about to give you, where they've diminished quite a bit, I blame it on the weather thing. But where ATV activity decreases, off-road activity increases. So far this year, we've done only 16 ATV impounds in the 11 details, and we issued 42 related summonses. With the off-road vehicles, we have gone up to 20, and we've given them over 30 summonses for riding off-road, plus all the various other incidents that happen on the lands. That's basically my report. Any questions for anybody? Glad to answer them.
Okay, thank you, Artie. Impressive as usual. It's discouraging that there are so many impounds though, but you're doing a great job out there. Okay, I guess next up is me talking about a potential dwarf pine trail, existing 3/4 of a mile loop trail in the dwarf pines adjacent to the commission office. And there we go. And across the road, County Route 31, which is right down through here, and there's the commission office. There's a lot of pretty good dwarf pine over here and a lot of existing trails. What I have been proposing to do is link up these existing trails with a little bit of extra cutting and make a 2.5 to 3 mile loop in here. Basically, I was out there about 10 days ago with Diana Lynch from Suffolk Parks, and we walked parts of this. And at other times, I've walked the remainder. A trail would start at the dirt parking lot opposite the commission office, you know, where the hot dog wagon is. So fine dining before or after a hike. We'd walk right up this way. There's an existing trail that kind of peters out right about here. Very minimal pruning involved here. It's really an existing trail. And then we would continue it this way. There was an old trail in here that has overgrown, but could be opened up without heavy equipment. Ditto over this way and down. These were existing trails. Again, some light pruning should do the trick. I'd swing the trail around to the west and southwest. This area over here is right on the border of where the 1995 wildfires came through. It's been fascinating to watch the progression since then. Now it's an extremely dense stand of pine. Then we pick up the old, what I call the clinker road. This is all paved with old spent coal, and most of it's still visible. And at this point, these are labeled 9A, 9B. There are two trails that go north. I think the better one is this actually, and the trail would continue up through an existing trail here, an existing trail here into an open area. This is an existing trail. And this section right here by number 13, that's a really difficult spot. It's so dense, you wouldn't know that there's an open field, 50, 75 feet tops, just off this trail. So we'd need some assistance from the county, brush cutting through there. The field that Sean showed you on his opening slide from his forest management presentation, full of the Hudsonia, is this large field here. And we would keep the trail along the western edge of it. We don't want to go traipsing right through there. It's too pretty in its own right. And then we'd hook up back to the start here. Down here, the old east-west road, there is a gate at number 17, and this should probably remain as a maintenance and emergency access. And, you'd have a nice kind of a rough double figure 8 here, going this way, down and around and back, and boom. Okay, this is an old burn area here. That was about 6 years ago, I believe. And by the way, we would close off from number 13 down to here. It used to be that we'd park here and walk down the road, which was not much fun, and get in this way. But there's an existing business, and they've blocked off this trail because it's a problem. People were getting into their backyard and equipment back there. And I'm sure they'd be happy to have this blocked off. So we do a little bit of cutting up here, but in exchange, it would be kind of a neutral in terms of letting things go fallow and doing some light cutting. So it's pretty doable, but again, with just this one spot. So that's what I'm proposing. I think between this and the Commission Trail across the street, you've got a nice educational resource going there. Right? Any questions? And thank you for putting the map up. No, okay. And thank you. And last but not least, Stu, you're up. Army Corps project.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, great. Hi, my name is Julie Rupp. I'm here from the Army Corps of Engineers to talk about a project that we're starting. With me, I have Todd Beckwith, also from the Army Corps of Engineers, who's our technical manager, as well as Kevin Foster, our project biologist. In addition, I have Jennifer Harlan, who is our project manager from our contractor Tetra Tech. And
I can't share my screen
you can't
to show the presentation.
All right, I'll try to share mine.
Someone,
you should be able to do it now.
Okay.
Oh, okay. I just started trying to share mine. You got it, Jen? All right, great. Okay, so we're here to talk about the former Suffolk County Army Airfield bombing and gunnery range. So it was a former practice range in the area. And so we'll go through the project. I'll show you some maps, you know, and just introduce you to our investigation that we are working on. We have had conversations in the past, mostly with Julie Hargrave of the Pine Barrens, some conversations as well with Polly, and then also with Suffolk County, and mostly with the town of Southampton. And I do want to mention too, I'm a volunteer on my conservation commission, so we're dealing with a lot of the same issues as you are with invasive species and water quality and you know, wetlands. So just thought I'd mention that. I found all the preceding presentations interesting. All right, Jen, do you want to go ahead? Thanks. Okay, so I just went over the agenda. We will you know, give you an overview of the program that we're working under. It's a federal program to remediate, investigate sites, and just talk about, so pretty much the entire project is within either the core area or compatible growth area of the Pine Barrens. And it's, our boundary is about 4,200 acres, so it's pretty large. Here's some acronyms. The Army is pretty famous for acronyms. I will, you know, do my best to make sure we're not using too much jargon, but there's quite a bit of it. Go ahead. So I just went through the project team in addition to Todd, me, and Kevin, our biologist. We have risk assessors, ordnance and explosive safety experts, geophysicists, chemists, cultural resources, real estate, because of course we own none of the property that we need to investigate. And then for our contractor, Tetra Tech, again, Jen Harlan is here, and she has a support team that mimics the USACE or the Army Corps team. So we're working under the formerly used defense sites or FUDS program. And so that's basically property that Department of Defense used to own and use, and the properties were transferred prior to 1986. The government recognizes that there's still liability on some of these properties. And so through the FUDS program, we work through investigating and potentially remediating sites under under CERCLA, which is the Superfund law. So here's just a brief overview for CERCLA and FUDS. And so this is the process that we go through. The identification already occurred, so we are now in the investigation phase, and we'll talk more about the investigation. The goals are to gather enough information to determine the nature and extent of leftover munitions, explosives of concern, or munitions constituents, and assess the hazards to human health and the environment. Munitions constituents means things like leftover metals or explosives in soils, whereas mech and munitions are, you know, more solid pieces of metal that, you know, that can be picked up. And so the objectives are to conduct a field investigation, you know, determine the nature and extent, and then assess potential risks and hazards to human health and safety in the environment, and also just to verify our boundaries. So here's a map. You can see our area is quite large. It spans Sunrise Highway. The blue circles are former targets. And so the area Again, it was associated with the former Suffolk County Air Force Base. And so the polygon you see in the red and yellow is the area where air fighters used to go and bomb and shoot to to practice. And this was World War II era, so it was between about 1942 and 1946 that this area was used. And so these are different types of targets. So here is a lot of words about the site. The entire FUDS, which is, the FUDS means the area that the Department of Defense owned, was about 9,200 acres. The area, the munitions response area, or the MRS, is what we're looking at, is that 4,297 acres. The site was used from 43 to 46 for bombing, strafing, and rocket fire training at 4 sub-ranges. And so that was what was depicted on the map that we saw before. Based on documentation, what we know, most appears to have been the 50 caliber machine guns and practice bombs and practice rockets. For a short period between May 43 and January 44, 100 and 500 pound high explosive bombs, incendiary bombs, and 4.5 inch high explosive rockets were reportedly used. No military structures remain at the site except for 2 target silhouettes, a destroyer and an aircraft carrier. We actually walked through the area on May 18th and 19th and were unable to locate these where they, due to the high density vegetation, we were unable to bushwhack our way through. But you can see some of these as white rocks on aerial photographs. And records indicate a surface clearance was conducted in 1946. So after the area was, the practice bombing was completed, the Army did, or the DOD did do a sweep of the area. And so they walked through and picked up what they could find to clean up the area. And so a cleanup was done to the standards of the time. The technical approach. So I think the items that Pine Barrens and Protected Lands Council would most be interested in is the vegetation reduction. So we, we'll have site set up with storage containers and toilets, and we're working with the town of Southampton mostly on determining appropriate areas for staging. Vegetation reduction. So we had a call with Pine Barrens close to a year ago to go through the transects and talk about the vegetation reduction. So we wouldn't remove trees 4 inches or greater in diameter. The stumps and roots would be left in place to protect the soil and foster regeneration. Brush material would be chipped and left in place to foster regrowth, and so the seed bed would remain. And then we're very much aware of the wildfire concerns in this area, so we would take all necessary precautions to avoid wildfire. And we don't expect to do any vegetation reduction in residential areas. So there are quite a few residential areas as well that are part of our project. Excuse me. So here is a map of the overall transect. So the north-south lines would be the proposed 500-foot transects. And so we would be looking to do vegetation reduction and then geophysics. And so the reason for vegetation reduction is because we have equipment that we need to run through the area. I think subsequent slides do have a picture of some of the equipment we would use, but in general, picture, pushing like a baby stroller, like a jogging stroller through the woods. And that's what we'll need to be doing with our equipment. excuse me. Yep. So there's at the bottom of the slide, there's a photo of one of the pieces of equipment. So you can see that it does hover fairly close to the ground. There's a little bit of clearance, but not a ton. And so that's the main reason that vegetation reduction would be required. The investigation will be conducted in 3 phases. So phase 1 is the vegetation reduction in the 500-foot transects and running geophysical equipment. And then based on the results of that survey, we will look at where we detect anomalies. And so anomalies means we detected a lot of metal in the subsurface. And so phase 2 would be to go back to the areas where there are high instances of anomalies and do mini grids. And the transects for the mini grids would be closer, it would be 50 to 100 feet rather than the 500 feet. And then once we do phase 2, we would get potential items where we would want to look at digging. So the sweeping that was done in 1946, it would have picked up the surface items. What we're looking for now is if munitions penetrated the subsurface and if there are items that need to be retrieved. Go ahead, Jen. And then so phase 3 would be the digging. We would have unexploded ordnance or UXO technicians to help dig on the locations and help handle health and safety. We would have an exclusion zone. We calculated 638 feet based on the type of munitions, and evacuations may be needed. So these are all things we are working on with the town and other agencies such as fire station and police station. We haven't contacted them yet, but that's part of what we're working on with the town. And then once we determine what we need to dig, we would collect soil samples for metals and explosives that are associated with munitions. So we want to know if there is contamination associated. And then also some limited groundwater may be sampled. However, based on the prior documentation, impacts to groundwater are not anticipated. Right, and so there's a 2009, we have a website with a fact sheet as well as this 2009 site inspection that's located on our website. So the town of Southampton has our project linked. You can also always contact me and I can provide backup documentation if you're interested in reading it or if you can't find the site inspection and are interested. Go ahead. So what does this mean for the Pine Barrens? We're looking at beginning our field work during fall 2021. So the vegetation reduction piece. We have done our Fish and Wildlife and state consultations. And so right now we have a time of year window restriction due to the northern long-eared bat. And so we cannot do any vegetation reduction between June 1st and July 31st. And other than that, we have not been provided restrictions other than, we've been in contact with the Pine Barrens and, are working to make sure we understand concerns from that standpoint, because we do recognize, we're in a conservation area. As far as personnel, it'll be less than 10 people conducting the investigation activities. The ATV, UTV presentation was interesting to hear because we would want to request the ability to use UTVs so that, if there was an emergency, we could evacuate personnel if necessary and just conduct the work in a more efficient fashion, to get equipment in and out. Fire mitigation activities, again, including coordination with the Pine Barrens fire management specialist. During digging, exclusion zones will be set up and evacuations may be necessary. We would work on that piece with the local public safety. If there are rangers as well. It's the prior presentation. Tim Huss, perhaps it might be a, you know, from an enforcement standpoint, we would want to coordinate with, you know, with whoever necessary from that standpoint, just to make folks aware that we're on the site and, you know, just be able to coordinate appropriately. To the extent possible, we're going to try to avoid digging in highly impactful areas, you know, so like next to Sunrise Highway, for example, or, you know, in neighborhoods, you know, like right next to someone's house, or if other areas are identified, you know, we are aware that, you know, the work that we're conducting is, you know, can be impactful. So we'll work as much as we can to, you know, to work with folks while still achieving our objectives. I talked about the time of year restriction, and then also summer tourist season. We are not, you know, we will not be working during summer tourist season, although since COVID, that doesn't seem like that's a thing anymore. There are definitely a lot of folks out on the island already. So, and then the other piece we're working on right now are rights of entry. And so, as I mentioned before, we don't own any of the property any longer. So we are dependent on private property owners, commercial property owners, et cetera, granting rights of entry and access for us to conduct our activities. And we need a couple hundred of them. And we are planning to have a public informational meeting. The date is TBD, but it'll be sometime between about June 10th and June 17th to host a public informational meeting about the rights of entry and allow people to ask questions and get more information. You know, it's designed for folks who, you know, were requesting access to their property, but, you know, I would certainly welcome any of you to attend as well. So the schedule, we are currently working on our work plans. We are working with the New York State DEC as well as Department of Health. And I think we'll be getting our work plans over to them for review. I'm thinking in about a month or so. And then again, the target date for field work. Field work will be conducted in phases. Phase 1 would start this fall, and then it would continue into the winter. And so that's currently, you know, the planned schedule. Then we would write our remedial investigation report. You know, and these items are all, they're all public documents and, you know, available for review. We will post them on our website, as well as I believe it's the West Hampton Library is our public repository. And so the reports would be available there as well. And then if significant impacts are indicated in the remedial investigation phase, we would go to a feasibility study phase, and that phase we would flesh out what options would be for remediation. And then we would have a proposed plan for what we recommend moving forward. And at that point, we would have a public meeting to present our plan to the public and stakeholders and hear feedback. And then once that piece is set, we would have the decision document phase is when it basically has the outcome of our investigation and what we need to do, or not moving forward. Sometimes there's monitoring, for example. And then just a safety reminder. So if you find something, if you're out, on the conservation lands, if you find something that looks suspicious, the 3 R's you recognize, retreat. So don't approach, touch, or move or disturb it, and then report it to 911 and advise the police of what you saw and where you saw it. And so I appreciate everyone's time. I know you're a bit beyond, but certainly certainly happy to take any questions.
After all these years, what actually prompted this project?
Sure. So the FUDS program, as you probably are aware, there are hundreds of properties where the Department of Defense had operations. And so the FUDS program prioritizes them by worst first. So we're just working our way down the list. And so the properties with higher, with higher contamination, higher risks to the public, they get completed first. This process was started in the late 80s. And so we're just up next on the list as far as priorities go. I would imagine the fact that the property was swept played into that as well. But that's, there's only so much money to go around, so it gets prioritized based on the risks.
Yeah. Well, I'll vouch for the 50 caliber munitions that were used there. About 30 years ago, I would pick up some shells now and then, the casings.
Yep. Yeah, we saw some remnants when we were walking out on site. Actually, the new trail area that you were presenting, the area off to the southwest where it had the several circular clearings kind of in a row, those were some of the areas where we saw some old metal and old casings.
Yeah. Yeah, it looks like our two ideas overlap slightly, but not a lot. Okay, any other questions for Julie? All right, well, thank you.
Thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
Okay, and we are running way over time here. On the agenda, it says roundtable announcements. Does anyone have anything to add before we say goodbye? Anyone else? Oh, all right. In that case, thank you, Sean, for setting this up, and Polly and Jade. And thanks everyone for your time and patience, and we'll see you at the next one in person, we hope.
Thanks so much, Tom. Thanks to all the speakers. Really appreciate it and hanging in there. Yeah, we packed a lot and we ran long for it. But yeah, appreciate everyone's great presentations and everyone's interest and attention. So thanks so much.
Big agenda.
Everyone.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys. Take care.